This is the Parliament Channel and Parliament Radio 105.5 FM.
The Honourable the Speaker.
The sitting is now resumed. Member for St. Augustine.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Almost every fiber of my emotional being tells me that I should support this bill. But then I know, as a criminal practitioner in the courts, of crimes of passion and emotions. And therefore, I have to take a step back and look objectively at what is before us. My friend, the learned Attorney General, has made a compelling case, buttressed by, of course, the very persuasive position put forward by the member for Laventille West, to buttress the position that criminality is at an all-time high in this nation, where murder seems to be as common as the rain in the rainy season, and the brazenness of criminality seems to have no limit. What do we do? Do we stand by and do nothing? Or do we take action? And I understand then the anxiety of my learned friends who are in government and therefore have the responsibility to take action. But this is a democracy, and for every action, at least in physics, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Where is the ground upon which we could agree that what is necessary to be done, what is effective that can be done, and that which will bring a balance between competing rights of our citizens and the duty of the state to protect the very citizens? Benjamin Franklin said that experience keeps an expensive school, but fools will learn in no other. When the legislation for anti-gang came up in 2011, I was part of the government, sat in the LRC, sat with others in Joint Select Committee, and because of the very prodding of those who are now asking for the return of anti-gang legislation, we gave them the authority of law that resides in this parliament. We gave them the authority to do the things necessary to protect us, because the bloodletting is not just of today. Bloodletting in this nation of Trinidad and Tobago has been with us for a long while. And we hope at some time in the future to be able to control it, mitigate it, and hopefully, against all hope, to stamp it out altogether. But we insisted then that these incredible powers given to the police must be balanced and there must be a limit, a time frame within which you must prove yourself so that we could be satisfied that you use those powers not in an abusive way, but really to achieve the very ends that we wanted. And a sunset clause was put for 5 years. And I think all of us in the Parliament felt some level of comfort that this experiment, this grand enterprise of incursion into fundamental rights must have a time frame within which it will be judged, at the end of which whether it is to be given rebirth or it should allow to remain in its grave. And that is where we are now. How do we judge whether this law, which we gave in 2011 and has now expired, whether it should be given rebirth? How many prosecutions have been successfully completed? Indeed, we saw with some level of embarrassment that prosecutions against a gang had to be withdrawn because instead of laying the charge summarily, which the law provided for, it was laid indictably. And who is responsible for that? I ask, how could something as simple as that have slipped by when this terrible nuclear weapon of power was given and they pressed the wrong buttons on it? It could have self-imploded. We are grateful that it has not. Madam Speaker, I find it more than embarrassing as a member of the Parliament, as a former Minister of Government, and I'm not putting that at the feet of the Attorney General, but what he said in this Parliament today should shock us, surprise us, and we should remonstrate in a very meaningful manner. The Attorney General, who is given the authority to act on behalf of all of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, sought from what he has indicated to us comments from the DPP's department. He sought comment from the Law Association, and as he indicated, from the judiciary. There may be good reason for the judiciary not to respond, and I'm grateful to my friend from Port of Spain North for reminding me why. Because ultimately the judiciary will have to determine the legitimacy of law, and therefore it might be infra-dig for them to really comment on legislation or propose legislation. But it could also be useful, and we should look into that, how we could do so without there being any crossover between the separation of powers issue. But something as important as this anti-gang legislation, I cannot comprehend if it is so that the Law Association did not comment on this. If that is true, then there's a terrible abdication of the responsibility of the Law Association to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, not just to the Attorney General, not just to the Parliament, but for all of Trinidad and Tobago. If it is true that the Director of Public Prosecutions equally, for whatever reason, I want to say it has something to do with the personality, because the present holder of that office I have great admiration and respect for. I knew him when he was first called to the bar. He worked with me. And through the years, he has only gained my respect as an incredible advocate for justice in this nation. And with the little resources that have been placed before him and the more resources that he had been given over the years, he has been able to do a lot and certainly needs much more. But it is shocking that an Attorney General could not be furnished with a response from the Director of Public Prosecutions. Because at the end of the day, whatever law we make here, it is to the Director of Public Prosecutions that we reside the power to prosecute. Under the Constitution, he has the sole authority to lay prosecutions, withdraw prosecutions, and do a host of other things. Therefore, we need to know from him or his office if he has serious reservations or, in fact, recommendations, or, in fact, he's totally satisfied with this new bit of legislation, because there have been changes from 2011 to this new draft. It will be reckless, irresponsible, and resolutely in poor taste for us to prepare law here send it into our books and into the minds of our citizens, but if the DPP is uncomfortable with it or has good reason to know that it cannot be properly operationalized, then we are really spinning top in mud. If I may humbly suggest, I know it was announced today, well, on the last occasion, that this bill we expected to go through its debate to all of the stages, at the end of which we shall vote today. I do not know if it will be imprudent of me to suggest that a further effort be made to get the views of the Director of Public Prosecution, because it is not too late. It is indeed the responsible and proper way to go. Madam Speaker, the DPP in the past would have gone on record to indicate that there are defects in the law, and therefore he was uncomfortable with it. And I would have hoped by now that the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Office of the Attorney General would have been able to work in some level of cooperation so that we would know if there are defects, how they can be repaired, and if there are things to be added, how we can add them, if there are things to be taken away, how we can take them away, and then we move forward. But it cannot be that we come and we hear the fire and fury of parliamentarians and then act in a vacuum, because the equation is only at best half heard. We have heard the side of the I almost say prosecution, but of the government. But there's another side. And my lady well knows the old statement, there are at least two sides to every story. We've heard the one side of the awfulness of the bloodletting. Our drains and rivers and our homes and our streets run red with the blood of our citizens. Indeed, with great pain, I read, thank you, member for Couva South, who brought to my attention a woman was executed in her home in central Trinidad. Yeah. I had not known that that woman worked at the Office of the Congress of the People as a cleaner, and she has been executed. A woman of very meager means, eking out a living, and she's executed. I can't imagine for what reason, and there can be no good reason for murder. I do not know if it's gang-related, but what I do know, it is murder. And I want to go to the point now that all this talk about gang, anti-gang, gang-related activity is only words, because at the end and at the core, on the foundation of this thing, is criminality. Criminality. And whether you come together under the definition, if you'll permit me to just read the definition of what we're dealing with. Under Section 4, the interpretation, gang means a combination of two or more persons, whether formally or informally organized, who engage in gang-related activity. And then we go now to the other part of the definition. Gang-related activity means an offense, A. B, an attempt to commit an offense. C, aiding, abetting, counseling, or procuring of an offense. Or D, conspiracy to commit an offense listed in the first schedule, which a gang leader or gang member plans, directs, orders, authorizes, or requests. This is very, very wide, because it means then that two fellas walking down the road and decide that they're going to perform a robbery. They see an act of convenience, an opportunity of convenience. It becomes a crime of convenience, an open door, for example. And they go in, they rob and or murder. Under this definition, it'd be gang-related, because they would have discussed it just before and agreed. And therefore, you have two gang members. I don't know who would be the leader, but they commit an offense and it's gang-related. The point I'm making is that if it is that the police in this country cannot solve the basic crimes for murder and or robbery, and you heard it from the lips of Laventil West, that gang-related activity is more complex, well then why put the burden on the police to go to that extra level? Because if you could prove the crime, you prosecute the crime, and you don't wait for the cover of gang-related activity. And that is where we are. This is the logic that has escaped many of us. It is easy and convenient to put an umbrella and put a name and give it this sort of larger-than-life exposure of gang and gang members. They are criminals. They must be rooted out. But the only way they could be rooted out is if we are able to prove that they committed crime. I remember, and this is on a lighter note, when I was in Presentation College, in A-levels in particular, in Chaguanas, there was a Chaguanas Senior Comprehensive. And there was a group from that school who called themselves the Travolta Boys. It's true. The Travolta Boys, flick back and everything. That was, you know. And they were in the habit of harassing girls in the most obscene way. And of course, we as press boys took a different view of these things. Not elitist in any way, but we needed to ensure that school persons who go to school carry themselves in a certain way. There was a certain expectation amongst ourselves, and certainly from the community, that press boys behave in a certain fashion. Press men. Well, we've grown up now. We were still there, teenagers. And there's a place called Busy Corner. They didn't call it then Busy Corner in Chaguanas, where all the pretty girls will be passing by. And these Travolta boys will come and harass them in the worst possible way. We would be there, but admiring from a distance with probably complimentary terms. And there we were. We were a gang. So were they. Robin Maraj, Imran Mohammed, Edsel Francois, Sheldon Lawrence, from my class onwards. And we decided we were going to stand up against this other gang. So under the definition of gang, we were there together, but not for an illicit purpose. The others were. The point I'm making, it is so easy to associate persons together. And if any number of those persons, for instance, if one of my classmates went and did something wrong, but because of this law, it sounds funny, but this is really serious. If any one or two of my classmates who belong to our lineman crew, gang, committed an offense, the police could take the view that we all belong to a gang and charge us as gang members. And if you think it's a stretch of the imagination, Madam Speaker, the learned Attorney General referenced the case Stuart and referenced Justice Burroughs' comments there. But I think it would be useful if we actually heard some of the facts and what the learned judge found as fact in that case. And with your leave, my lady, it is reported at the Express dated 30th of June 2015. With your leave, the state can expect a slew of civil lawsuits resulting from the ruling yesterday of High Court Judge Joan Charles, who found the arrest of a Marabella parlor owner during the 2011 state of emergency amounted to wrongful arrest, false imprisonment, and malicious prosecution. It is the first such judgment arising out of the state of emergency-related lawsuit. In her judgment in the San Fernando High Court, Charles was scathing in her criticisms of the police officers involved in the arrest of Kevin Stewart.
Honourable Member.
Yes, of course.
Thank you for giving me. I just want to caution that that ruling of Madam Justice Joan Charles was overruled in large part as to findings of fact in the Court of Appeal. Thank you.
The malicious prosecution aspect. Anyhow, but this is the comment of the learned judge. She said, Police Constable Phillips, who arrested Stewart, fabricated evidence and lied. And the conduct of Assistant Superintendent Mohammed and Assistant Commissioner of Police Fredericks, who instructed that Stewart be charged, amounted to a gross dereliction of their duty, and they were irresponsible and unprofessional in how they assessed the evidence based on Anti-Gang Act. Stewart was awarded, and I know there was an adjustment to the award, of $350,000 in aggravated exemplary and special damages as compensation for his arrest and month-long detention, which ended after the Director of Public Prosecution, Roger Gaspard, came to court and announced the case against him and 199 other SOE detainees were being discontinued for lack of evidence. More than 4,000 persons were arrested during the SOE, which was called by Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar on August 21st, 2011, and ended on December 6th, the anniversary today of that year, 6 years ago. Attorney Kevin Ratiram, a really good lawyer, who represented Stuart, said yesterday that the judgment was in fact a victory for the rule of law. And we go on. What had happened there is that this man had been charged under the Anti-Gang Act on the basis that he had been involved as a gang member because he sold drugs. And that because he associated with people he sold drugs to, those were the other gang members. And therefore, one sees now how common crime could be put under the umbrella of this grievous thing called anti-gang legislation. And observe what happened too, Madam Speaker. This is one of many such cases. The Director of Public Prosecutions himself discontinued the prosecutions. And I do not know, nor do I have comfort, that the very police who we are hearing are asking for this return of this all acidic law, whether they have properly prepared themselves in terms of evidence. And I ask, and I will take my seat for the answer to the Attorney General. If this Parliament today agrees with you and with your plea for this legislation to return, because the police, as you've indicated, have given and furnished you with the names, addresses, numbers of gangs and gang leaders, and I'm sure with your consultation, as responsible as you are, would have inquired whether they had the quality and the evidence that is justificable to prosecute them tomorrow. I put that question and I asked the Attorney General if he could tell us that to give me some comfort.
Thank you, Honourable Member, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. The answer to that, in short, is yes. And more so, mainly because the judgment that you referred to of Madam Justice Joan Charles and the findings of fact was so completely wrong that the Court of Appeal reversed every single one of the points. No, it's not something to celebrate. I know that you were referring to an issue and drawing from it, but I just wanted to caution, in answering this as yes, Mr. Justice Bureau felt that the judge was so unreliable in her findings against the police that the Court of Appeal dealt with facts itself in a very way. So the short answer is yes, and I assure you, you can be comforted.
Well, I'm grateful to hear that. And that is why it bothers me even more that the Director of Public Prosecutions has not intervened to say whether, yes or no, he is in support of this legislation. Right? And Attorney General, how grateful I am that it shows then the very weaknesses in our system that a High Court judge can get it so wrong. And had it not been, for instance, because these are summary offenses, yeah? Had the DPP not intervened and stopped those prosecutions, then you would have had persons who at that time would have spent time in custody without bail, correct, for 120 days. Do we have the 120-day limitation in this? No, we do not. But we do have the capacity under this law to keep you in detention for a period for 72 hours during the first 48. Senior officers are to look at the evidence to determine whether a further detention is necessary. And then, if they are satisfied, then go to a court for 14 days detention. And that therein lies the big problem with this. Because if it is that we are to subscribe still to the presumption of innocence that we all deem to be innocent until proven guilty, the fact that you could detain and the regular, and there's a misconception in the country that the law says that it can detain you for 48 hours without any reason. That is not correct. You have to have reason first to hold. And then you are entitled up to 48 hours, but if you are to go far, in any event, take you before a court. Now, this law extends it to 72. And then they have the authority to go before a judge and put on affidavit, I imagine, the reasons and basis upon which they think they require 14 days. Affidavit in these matters, I tell you, is as what shall I say, as bare as you could possibly get. Right. And the courts, to be fair, having regard to the same passion that we all feel to deal with the criminality, sometimes accept, because it is unchallenged, that what is before them is sufficient and grant these things. So you have the capacity to the state to detain our citizens, guilty or not guilty or whatever, on a suspicion for this extended period. And that is why we must be very, very careful, because it undermines the very, very foundation of our Constitution. Look, we have to be real. And being real does not mean to be blinded by what is just before us. The reality of life is that which has been, what is today, and what shall be tomorrow. Trinidad and Tobago does not exist only in 2017. Trinidad and Tobago must exist into 2018, and I hope to imagine 2021, 2022, under a new government, of course. 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years into our future. And therefore, as difficult as things may be, there must always be a balance. There must be a tension between the rights of our citizens and the authority given by those who give the authority to rule and govern. The moment we remove that tension, it goes one way or the other. If they are all rights, then they become all wrongs. And if you give all power, then it's all consuming and there's no democracy. And I remember the old statement that if two heads shall become one, there is need for only one. And that is why it is painful to hear members on the other side attack the opposition whenever there is a debate and say that they're not patriotic. If we were to rush across on your side and give you everything you want, then these benches will be empty. And then you will have a resolute, complete power to do what you want. And I tell you this, having the example and experience, having sat in government, having the responsibility, it changes your perspective. But when having come back on this side, and in particular having been to our courts more recently, then I realized, wait a minute. There is a truth, and there are perceptions of that truth. But the truth never changes, only what you perceive. And the perception, being in government, is that all that you do is patriotic and in the interest of our people, forgetting altogether that the other side of the story must be told. I'll give you an example. I defended 2 weeks or more ago a police officer who had been on suspension, Nanan Balgobin. He waited 14 years for his trial. What happened there? Having been on suspension, he was driving his car down in the deep south in the nighttime period. He observes a car tailing him. He slows down. The car slows down. He speeds up. They speed up. He pulls aside to let him pass. Two men jump out, unmarked car, ununiformed, in plain clothes. Two men run out with guns. He sees this, he panics, he thinks he's going to be a victim of murder, robbery, and the very least. He takes off. There's a chase. Bullets fly from the pursuing car. His car is hit. And by the grace of God, he comes upon a patrol car, a police-marked vehicle with uniformed officers in it. He jumps out of his car, runs to them and says, men chasing him. At the same time, this car pulls across. Two men jump out, police, jump on him. You know these things happen. Throw him to the ground, grab him and take him, arrest him and locked up. Jesus Christ. 14 years he had to wait. Wow. Guess what? The officers who he had seen in the marked police vehicle went to their station that very night and wrote exactly what they saw. Evidence was given in the court by one officer in particular, who a judge of the High Court had found to be lying to the court and had stopped the case as a result. But he continued and got promoted. His senior retired as an assistant commissioner of police. The two of them gave evidence that they saw this man coming, intercepted him, searched him, and found gun and ammunition in his pocket. Completely contradicted by the independent evidence that we were able to get of the uniformed officer and a police station diary entry. But guess what? Nothing in relation to the lies. Because if it is that the uniformed officer put in the police station diary 14 years ago, the very night, no form of communication with the accused, then something was terribly wrong with the prosecution's case. And we were fought tooth and nail by prosecutors in that court to even keep out the evidence of the police station diary. But by fortitude, Mr. Michael Ruplal and I, we were able to get that to the jury. And the jury acquitted in no time at all. Thank God for jury trials in this country. The point I am also making, which I will repeat over and over, is that you cannot put icing, not on a cake, but a foundation of rot.
People put out pages from diary as well.
And unless we get that right, Attorney General, and I think you're on the right course, chasing the money and other things. But unless, and I think member for Laventille West referenced it well, about corrupt officers. Could I have your protection from both sides, please?
Okay, honorable members, I'd like to hear the contribution for the member for St. Augustine. Member, I've allowed you some width. I wish now that you can address the particular matter before us.
I was grateful because I'm done with it. Yeah, so that unless we get rid of those the functionaries who we give authority to make sure that they use it properly, use the power, not as a weapon, but as a tool to fix things rather than to destroy lives, then we will be putting onto the society another form of evil clothed in governmental or police authority. And these are not things I say lightly. I am grieved that our country could be where it is. Because there are so many great, wonderful civil servants in the police service and in other institutions. But there are others who are there always to pollute their good work, bring down our whole department's reputation, and we need to deal with that. Because the level of abuse that is now available under existing law and this proposed law is enormous. It would help us to no end to look at some of the actual wording in this bill, which is replicated in a large part from the 2011 bill. Madam Speaker, this section 5. For the purpose of this act, it shall not be necessary to show that a particular gang possesses.
Honorable member, your original 30 minutes are now spent. You are entitled to 15 more minutes if you wish. You may proceed.
Absolutely, I shall have to put it in fast forward. The speed limit lifted yet? Yeah. Anyhow, well, I won't have time, but we should look at the definition here. It is as wide as one could get, and therefore we are all subject to fall within it. But for the sake that I shall never forget to put on the record my abomination that under the new schedule, Madam Speaker, I'm not having the time to go through all of them. What has been put in at the last line, number 28 of the offenses, gang-related activity offenses, the offense of sedition. As suspicious a mind as one could have, you could interpret all sorts of things into this. But for the unsuspecting, and I'm sure the Attorney General, because of his workload and other reasons, may not have truly comprehended the effect of putting this section in. And I could never, ever support this bill with this section 28 on sedition. I will tell you why. I will tell you why. I don't say things lightly, I say it with reason. Under the Sedition Act, Madam Speaker, it reads, a seditious intention, well, maybe I should read the offense itself. Yes.
It's so wide it is.
It is as wide as some mouths that I hear, but not as deep as the intellect. Yeah, I agree. I can't find this section anymore, but it says this. A seditious intention is an intention to bring hatred or contempt or to, hear this one, or to excite disaffection against government or the representatives of the Senate of the administration of justice. One can interpret this to be legitimate expressions that may not find favor against the government. Trade unions will be in jeopardy. Political parties. Listen, we've had prosecutions for sedition in this country already. Infamous prosecutions for sedition. I'm not saying you, Attorney General, use it. It's not for you. It is a law. And there may be a police officer who may find it convenient. Yeah. I was there when they locked up David. I was there. I saved him. And I will tell you something, Madam Speaker. There's a photograph, right? Because I was running the Axe Tax campaign. And if, I am boasting, if I was not there, there would have been bloodshed. Right? If I was not there, there would have been bloodshed. You could see the ferocity of some of the officers thinking that they were doing the right thing, passing blows on people. I had to say, no, stop this. We are not here for that. So that if it is that some other political party wishes to run a campaign about don't pay the property tax, it could be under this definition by a twisted mind, be seditious. If the leader of the opposition says, say, don't fill out no form, it could be interpreted here as seditious. And I say this, if I am to assist as a member for St. Augustine in support of any legislation, I cannot do so with the existence of this here. I cannot do so, once again, if there is no sunset clause in this. There must be a finality. Madam Speaker, there is so much more, and I can't imagine the time has gone so quickly, but the Attorney General, my friend, my dear friend, said something that troubled me to no end because he's one of the brightest minds in this country. And he says that you will have video. You can have video of men holding what cannot best be described as guns. Because the law says for you to prove that it is a firearm, there must be forensic examination for the armorer to say this is a firearm under the Act. So therefore you cannot prosecute under a video. And I am sure almost, that one would have been persuaded to make that very basic error because of the first offense stated in the gang-related activities first schedule. Possession of imitation firearms in pursuance of a criminal offense. There is no offense of posing with a baby gun. None. If it is that it is a real gun and you catch them, charge them for possession of firearm. If it is an imitation gun that you use and say, give me your money, then of course that is an offense because it is an imitation firearm and you're using for the pursuance of a robbery. That is an offense, but you cannot use video or even still photographs. I have no time, I'm sorry, my brother. Yeah. To say that you can prosecute and call them gang members because they're photographed together. They have so many situations in this country, people photobombing, and so I'm just being a little bit light, but this is real, where you could just be in the area and a photograph is taken and somebody doing something, and you in it, you're associated because I talk to and I'm a gang member, and then I fall victim to all of the powers that we are giving to the police. And I want to warn Attorney General, the very people who ask you for these powers are the very people who ask us for a state of emergency, you know. Let me repeat that. The very people who ask for these powers are the people who ask for a state of emergency. When it was acting as we were,
Mr. Gibbs was not here. He knew nothing about it.
could we discipline? That is gangster behavior.
Member for Laventille West, member for Caroni East, member for Naparima. I would not continue to tolerate all of this shouting across the floor. That behavior I consider unparliamentary, and please don't push me to invoke the powers that I have. Continue, please, member for St.
Thank you very much. What was I saying? Yeah. What was I saying? So that here we are, that they wanted the power, state of emergency, a government being told by security offices that we required it to prevent a bloodshed. What did the partnership do? We gave them the authority. And look what happened. 4,000 persons were arrested. And I want to tell you something. We made it very clear that we never took any hands-on in relation to tell the police what to do or how to do their business. So that when they arrested 4,000 people, whoa, it was a shock to everyone that, wait, now you have evidence on all these people? What has happened? Right? Please conduct yourself now. Yeah. As a true police officer, have some discipline. Yeah.
Well, you're asking for the impossible.
And you know what happened? And it's a shame for me to say it, but somebody has to say it. Unfortunately, 4,000 young men from constituencies across this country were jailed, their rights taken, their liberties forfeit. And you know what was said about the partnership? That we do that, and it was a racist thing. It pains me to no end that people could even suggest that, but they did. And they rode that horsey into government. Really? So be careful of the powers they ask for. And that is why you have to be careful that you become a police state by the time the police asks something, you give them. The example I use of Danan Balgobin is one of thousands. Not everybody who before the court guilty. Not everybody who before the court innocent. But I'm making the point in this country here, the suspicion is with due reason. And whether the Court of Appeal overruled that judge, I want to tell you something. That is a judge I have the greatest respect for. And made a finding, and there are many others where findings were similar. And I could go on and on of the ignominy of persons who are innocent and put before the courts and have to go through the regime of a prosecution, conviction sometimes, and then overturn on appeal. And the poor, powerless is what we're talking about here. The very people who are victims of the bloodshed are the very people who will be victims of the anti-gang legislation. And that is why we must move cautiously. I want to support this. But in its present form, and without the input of the person responsible for the prosecutions, how could we? How could we? Yeah, already? So, Madam Speaker, it's simply this. Could we, and this is not a cop-out, this is really about asking for mature deliberation to allow the DPP and the Law Association, and I want to tell you something, I sat as chairman of the LRC, and there are many occasions we asked for comments from different bodies, and they just wouldn't respond. I couldn't believe that at that level that you get an opportunity to participate in lawmaking, and you don't. What we would do then, and I'm sure the Attorney General would have followed on with it, is to write and give a deadline, right? After which we make a phone call, after which we go and meet with and invite them too. Because you just can't leave it. Something as serious and as important as this, you didn't get a communication. Yeah. And that is why it is important to have continued, and we shared it with you, the Justice Committee, where every 3 months we met with the Chief Justice, the DPP, and many other stakeholders in law enforcement, in the judicial process. And we were able to have broken a lot of the log jams that had taken years to have dealt with. We were able to do that, and I hope that they continue that. And at those are the meetings at which, if you can't get the DPP on the phone, you meet him in person and tell him what is happening. There's no great anxiety and rush.
So if you can move on to another point in the precious time that you have left.
Thank you very, very much. Another example of how we have failed. Just 2 weeks ago, my lady would have seen on the TV or in the news that we all celebrated. They had a find of machine guns and ammunition in a washing machine behind a house in Attorney General, I think is in your constituency, Mount Moriah Road. Yeah. I could have told you, well, something going to happen. But the police didn't know. When they found that there will be a consequence to it, nobody kept looking to see who come Guess what happened? The house right in front, according to newspaper reports, TV reports, men went in there and killed a woman and burned down the house. And one male person escaped with his life. There are consequences to these things. And if there are gangs, and all this intelligence, you find machine guns. That ain't no little boy thing. Machine guns with a ton load of ammunition and some drugs, I'm not too sure. But all this, you couldn't think that there will be people coming to check to see what's going on and who might be responsible. Nobody kept a lookout. It is no stretch of the imagination that the murder of that woman and the burning of that house was connected to information given to her, or the police found that. So I take no comfort in all this SSA and information with cell phone and all this other thing. A classic example too, and I'm not going to beat this for the sake of anything other than the fact that in policing is not just about detecting but anticipating. When they locked up men in the Beatum, it's not without precedent that there is a consequence. There are gangs. If there are gangs, the gang members will come out. We didn't anticipate that, and then they call it a lapse. Minister of National Security, I sympathize with you. You are the head of it, you take out the responsibility, but it is further down that true responsibility should reside. Do your work properly. Don't come here and ask for more power when you can't use the ones we gave you already. Thank you very much.
Member for St. Joseph.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. As I join the debate on this very important piece of legislation, the Anti-Gang Bill of 2017. Before I get into my contribution, I think it will be remiss of me, and on this side, if we did not condole with our colleague from Chaguanas West on the recent bereavement of his father, and may his soul rest in eternal peace. Madam Speaker, the member for Naparima started off with the utterance that this side is fundamentally different from that side. And that was the one true thing he said today. This side, when in opposition, supported over 96% of the UNC's anti-crime legislation for the period 2010 to 2015. We supported the then anti-crime legislation. We supported 4 out of 5 amendments to the Bail Act. We supported every piece of anti-crime legislation except for 2. One, the infamous Soldier Police Bill, and 2, we also did not support the categorization of murders. Those were the only 2 I could remember we did not support. But the member for Naparima is going to be infamous for the approach taken to criminality in the face of increasing murders. And to quote, he said we should not be locking up people. The prison is so full that you should not be locking up people. That rather, you should take people and love them and talk to them. He said you should not be profiling people. Madam Speaker, I want to refresh the countries through you, Madam Speaker, because I'm speaking as member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, oft says, we are speaking to the right-thinking, patriotic citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So when my friend from Naparima talks about we should be loving these people and embracing them and not locking them up, I want him to reflect on the Hansard of none other than Senator the Honorable Anand Ramlogan, as he was then, on Wednesday, December 1st, 2010, on the anti-gang bill. And I quote, Madam Speaker, "The Constitution, as you know, Mr. Speaker, gives right to life, liberty, security of the person, and enjoyment of property. But these freedoms are not absolute." When they were in government, they advocated for the taking away of the right of freedom as under the Constitution. But today, when they are in opposition and we are in government, we must not lock up anybody. We must love them. Right? I want to go on and quote again from the Hansard of that same day, the contribution of then Mr. Herbert Volney of Wednesday, December 1st, 2010. We want to talk about loving people, not locking them up. Herbert Volney said, if this measure is termed draconian, then we shall have to live with the term draconian.
And he was Minister of what?
And he was Minister of Justice.
Which government?
As we all say, Buckley's is bitter, but it works. So Buckley is good for them in government, but when we are in government, it ain't good. We must love them. We must welcome them into our bosom and hold their hand. Right? Don't jail them. I continue to rebut once and for all Naparima when he says, talk to them. This is the contribution on that same day of somebody called the Honorable Prakash Ramadhar. When we spoke of there being harshness in the legislation, that is the legislation that you were bringing in 2011, your legislation. When we spoke of there being harshness in the legislation, it is only in response to the harshness of criminality. That was your words. And I had to hear Naparima today say, let's not be harsh. Let's love them. Let's embrace them. Hypocrisy. Absolute hypocrisy. I go on. The Honorable Prakash Ramadhar on that same day. When you take a gun and you have to gain membership in a gang, as you rightly said, sometimes by taking a life to prove, I think the Attorney General said that you are worthy of entering the hallowed halls of that gang, then you must deal with them as criminals they are. That is the Honorable Prakash Ramadhar. But today, we must not deal with them as criminals. We must love them. We must embrace them.
First speaker, the frontline speaker.
He goes on. That is the Honorable Prakash Ramadhar in total violation and opposition to what Naparima says today. They must know that there is a serious consequence associated with others who are criminals. What absolute hypocrisy. But we must love them today. We must love them. Madam Speaker, when Naparima said we must stop arresting people and we must go back to preschool, we must go back to primary school, we must go back to the secondary school and stop the supply, I want to remind this country, through you, Madam Speaker, I'm speaking to you and the country, not to them. When this current Prime Minister, in the year 2002, when he was Minister of Planning and Development, and that was one of the first times I heard him speak in the Parliament. In 2002, he floated the idea of taking at-risk youth between the ages of 17 to 25. Those of us who are in the politics for a long time should remember that contribution by the then Honorable Keith Rowley, Minister of Planning and Development.
What did I tell him?
He said, let us take at-risk youths between the ages of 17 to 25 and train them, possibly use COSTAT as a mechanism of targeting at-risk youth. He did not define any race. He did not define any ethnicity. But you know what the UNC did? They played the race card.
They always live with race. Everything with them is race.
Race card. So that is what we want to do. Madam Speaker, I really long for the day when Mr. Winston Ducaran was in this House. He was a patriot. Because I have a feeling, if you lift the whip today, there are at least 5 members sitting opposite us who would vote for this bill. At least 5. I'm not going to call them. Because it was Mr. Winston Ducaran who, after 5 years of UNC, had the courage to lead a revolt of the then Congress of the People on the morning when we had the bill to pass those election laws, and led a revolt to vote by conscience. But I miss the days when this parliament had a serious member of the Congress of the People. I really miss those days. Really, really miss those days. Madam Speaker, the Member of Parliament for Naparima made heavy weather of the fact that the DPP and the Law Association did not respond. It took the remnants of the Congress of the People to say here today that it is unforgivable that those two officers did not respond to the Attorney General. And then he went on to say even when he was chairman of the LRC, they did not respond to him. This Attorney General, like him when he was chairman of LRC, wrote 17 times. 17 times. Not on this one, but on others, to get comments. This Attorney General wrote to the office of the DPP and the Law Association on July 6, 2017. Constant reminders and no reply to date. What is the Attorney General to do? Right? 5 months. So we are very clear that the Attorney General did everything possible. Madam Speaker, we are hearing through the grapevine we must be going to a joint select committee on this bill. I want to remind the country that I have in my hands the report of the Joint Select Committee and report on the Anti-Gang Bill 2010. The Attorney General was at pains to point out the fact that this bill only has about 3 clauses which are fundamentally different to the old piece of legislation. Let me ask, is it that you want to go back to a JSC on clause 8 because you want to have further discussions on retaliatory action? Let me tell you what the JSC did for the period. The Attorney General just briefly mentioned it. But because of the utterances of Pointe-a-Pierre that they want to go to a JSC, it is now incumbent upon us to put on the Hansard what the JSC did. And to show that going back to a JSC is just delaying the process and kicking the can down the road again, and criminals are going to run riot again. So this JSC, Madam Speaker, actually met over a period of Tuesday, January 11, 2011 to Monday, February 28, 2011. They met 8 times. 8 times. There were preliminary discussions. There was expert assistance from Mr. Nakul Maharaj, Senior Parliamentary Counsel, and Mr. Mara Dukran, Parliamentary Counsel 2. There were requests for submissions, and here who they requested submissions from. In keeping with its mandate, your committee approved the proposal to request submissions from the Criminal Bar Association with a deadline of January 31st, 2011. Did we receive any? We received none back then. But go back again.
After 5 months of writing that.
Right? We received none back then. The Joint Select Committee also had a PowerPoint presentation. At its 3rd meeting, your committee viewed a PowerPoint feature entitled Criminal Street Gangs, which was presented by a representative of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. You want us to go back and do that again? Again? There was also an oral presentation from the police service and the anti-gang legislation would greatly assist in the fight against crime. But this is what chilled my blood. As the deliberations continued, Madam Speaker, listen to this carefully. I know you are. This is on page 7 of the JSC report. You want to have more talk on this point? As the deliberations continued, details of parents who actually lived in fear of their children came to light. That is what the JSC considered. In 2011, parents were scared of their children who are in gangs. 6 years later, I am scared because I am an MP, as all of us are MPs in areas that have gangs. And the question is, what is the MP doing? We're going to go back to hear these same submissions from the same people for the sake of what? So that the opposition can say the PNM is not dealing with crime. In the JSC, there was also consideration of the bills. And finally, it says, and this is a report by then Senator Anand Ram Logan, during the deliberations, there was wide consensus in your committee with respect to the objective for the introduction of the anti-gang bill. Why do they want to go back to a joint select committee? To do what? Other issues raised, and where are the 3 new clauses or clauses which are changed, so fundamentally different, so fundamentally flawed, so fundamentally far-reaching, that you want to go back and have other issues raised like the receipt of goods and all of that. This is the work of a joint select committee. Why do you want to go back to it now? It is useless, it is going to be frivolous, and it is simply an attempt by people deemed unpatriotic not to want to help this government solve crime. This country. Correct. Correct. Madam Speaker, I am again slightly appalled by my good friend, the good criminal lawyer that he is, the member for St. Augustine. We all know we have problems with the police service. We all know that. But to put forward an argument that you should not pass legislation or any piece of legislation because you have a few bad apples in the police service who abuse their powers is not, in my view, and in view of this side, good thinking. But what was most difficult to understand is why he would use the case of Kevin Stewart to pillory the police service and to use that instant case as an example of police overreach and police brutality. Why did he conveniently forget the fact that in the civil appeal number P162 of 2015 between the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago and Kevin Stewart, AC, Kevin, also known as Kevin Stewart, the Stewart spelled differently, where on page 7 of the Court of Appeal judgment it states, and the country needs to understand when the scaremongering comes from that side, it is not based on fact. The fact is, in the Court of Appeal, and I want to rebut my good friend from St. Augustine, the judge said, in my judgment, the judge failed to properly analyze the evidence in its entirety and drew inferences from the evidence of ASP Mohammed and PC Phillips which were not justified. But Madam Speaker, when you go to paragraph 39 of the judgment, that is where we have to be careful how we criticize the police. And what does paragraph 39 of the judgment say? Madam Speaker, I need to put this on the Hansard to correct the claim of overreaching by the police in this instant case. In my judgment, it is quite plain on the facts of this case that the 3 police officers involved were motivated to apply the law fairly and with bona fides. The difficulty is that the provisions of the Anti-Gang Act require close application. Group action is not always easily proven. Without inside information provided from infiltration of the gang by an undercover police officer or a former member of the gang, proof of gang membership and gang activity was always going to be a hard sell. And I remember in 2011, when we were debating that, we spoke about infiltration. But listen to this, because you really have to wonder why St. Augustine went down the line he did with the police. It goes on to say, P.C. Phillips conscientiously sought over the period of 8 months from December 2010 to obtain the requisite evidence on the respondent. In other words, he did everything right. He did not overreach. He did not set up. While it is not sufficient to arrest or charge, it cannot be said that he acted otherwise than in the bona fide execution of his duties. The judge's finding that his senior officers were in dereliction of duty has no evidential basis. Totally opposite, diametrically opposite to what St. Augustine put on the Hansard. That is why I'm saying I am disappointed about the remnants of the COP in this House. Yeah, and this is a Court of Appeal decision versus the Express newspaper quoted from. I come to a close. This was an issue which did not arise on the facts of this case and would have required an examination of the circumstances under which these senior officers operated at the time. And here comes the punchline. Because the police needs to understand this. The country needs to understand when they are being misled. It cannot be said that the senior officers were guilty of dereliction of duty. But that side today would have you believe that this piece of legislation should not see the light of day based on an express article and not based on a judgment of the Court of Appeal of Trinidad and Tobago. So when we say they are unpatriotic, we stand on good ground. Why do you mislead the population like this all of the time? Why? Madam Speaker, to listen to St. Augustine again, who is a criminal lawyer, talking about he Lyman by Busy Corner and Shogunas, the Travoltas, this, and is a gang, and putting fear in the people of Trinidad and Tobago, that if this piece of legislation is passed, then any amalgamation of 2-3 fellas by a corner, the police, using their wide sweeping powers, will swoop down on you, put you up, throw them in jail, throw in some dry hair, light a match, and walk away from it.
Just for being a gang member.
Right? Just for being a gang member. But you see, if you read the bill and read things in its entirety and do some cross-referencing, you would see that there's something called Schedule 1. And when you cross-reference Schedule 1 with the definitions, you get this. So on the definitions of gang-related activity on page 3 of the bill, section 4 under definitions, in this act, gang-related activity means an offense, an attempt to commit an offense, the aiding, abetting, counseling, or procuring on an offense, or a conspiracy to commit an offense listed in the first schedule, which a gang leader or member plans, directs, orders, authorizes, or requests. So if the boys from Presentation College, Lyman by Busy Corner and Shogunas, suiting the girls in the most vulgar way, that is not going to fall under this piece of legislation. That is not criminal activity as described in the Act. It is not criminal activity under the first schedule.
My friend alluded the statement, what I made the example, the Stuart case is exactly what I'm speaking to, where the person who sold the marijuana and the person who bought were ganged together. And that's the point I was making. So therefore, the innocent liming is one thing. But of course, it must be attached to criminality.
Madam Speaker, as I said, the remnants of the COP again raised its head. So what does the first schedule speak about? You're liming by busy corner, you're harassing the girls, you're shooting them. As vulgar, as obscene, as uncivilized as that may be, to put that into a debate, to frighten the population that this bill is going to trap them, does not hold water. Because the gang-related activities are, and I don't have time to list all 28, larceny of a motor vehicle does not apply to Busy Corner and the Travolta boys. Arson, unless they're burning down Busy Corner pharmacy. Receiving stolen goods, unless they're receiving stolen Viagra from Busy Corner pharmacy. Gang membership, coercing, and you see, I know where Busy Corner is by the taxi stand there. Preventing a gang member from leaving the gang. Recruiting a gang member. Demanding money with menaces. Murder. Shooting or wounding. Robbery. Robbery with aggravation. Robbery with violence. Assault occasioning actual bodily harm. Trafficking. It does not fall under any of these things. So when they strike fear into people saying, 2-3 fellas by the corner, shooting a girl, you will be taken in under the anti-gang legislation. It is all hooey, gooey, and baloney. Does not make sense. It just does not make sense. Madam Speaker, Section 12, which is a newish section as said by the Attorney General, which was split with Clause 13. Is it that you want to go back to a JSC to talk about harboring a gang member? Right? Why? We already have laws about harboring. The Vicky Budram case recently. But this is harboring a gang member. We are not reinventing any wheel here about harboring. And it was there already. But you want to go back to a joint select committee to meet again, and this is a report, to meet 8 times, to have oral presentation, requests for submissions, expert advice, preliminary discussions, to talk about harboring a gang member. My God, I don't understand the plain obstructionism and opposition that pervades our friends opposite. Why would you object in Section 14? You want to have a joint select on this now? You want to have a joint select to try this case either way? In the Magistrates Court and the High Court? You want to go back to a joint select committee to meet, and each meeting in a joint select committee lasts, what, 2 to 3 hours? You had 8 meetings between Tuesday, January 11th, and Monday, February 28th. How many man-hours you spend here?
We started 10 o'clock and we finished 1.
Right? How many man-hours you spend here already? 8 threes, 24 man-hours. Tying up parliamentarians, tying up the parliament staff. Costing, providing lunch, whatever. You want to recreate this simply to say that the PNM can't deal with crime? But when you were in opposition, when you were in government, we helped you with 96% of your anti-crime legislation. 96%. Madam Speaker, I want to take a little while now to maybe refer directly to my friend from St. Augustine. After the Attorney General wrote to the Honorable Member from Superior's designate on that side as the conduit for discussions on this bill, the Senator, the Honorable Gerard Ramdeen, Oh, sorry, Senator Ramdeen. After 5 months, if it is you want a sunset clause, tell us. Recommend something. So the member for St. Augustine mentioned it in passing. If it is you want a sunset clause, tell us. Let the next speaker get up here and says, you recommend to the Attorney General he look at a sunset clause. And let the Attorney General get up and give you a reply. You could have a sunset clause. We could look at the data after we enact. We could review it. You could have a review clause. You could do anything you want. You could have a comprehensive review of it. You could have a regulatory review of it. You could have a selective review of it. You could have a discretionary review of it. You want a cursory review? No problem. You want a full review? No problem. You want a sunset clause? Tell us. But recommend something instead of just opposing for the sake of opposition, which is what Naparima did. Just oppose for the sake of opposition, and the only snippet of a recommendation has come from the remnants of the COP. And I congratulate my friend for that. Tell us, do you want a sunset? Let the next speaker get up here and tell this country you are willing to support this legislation if you get a sunset clause. And let the Attorney General reply. Madam Speaker.
Honourable Member for St. Joseph, your original 30 minutes are now spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes if you wish to avail yourself.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, like my colleague from Laventille West, I want to relate a couple of experiences in the constituency of St. Joseph where there are gangs, which I have to deal with on a daily basis. Madam Speaker, I have always said in this country that education is the greatest equalizer that we have. Education. The People's National Movement pioneered free education in this country. But people have to take ownership of free education and the opportunities that arise from free education. Madam Speaker, I was in Sawa Hill, just outside the Sawa police station. For those of you who know that area, there's the Sawa police station, Sawa Health Center, on the road to go up to Santa Cruz by the cemetery, and you could go up to Maracas eventually. I was taking a walk there one day, and a young man across, this is the true story, I kid you not. I was taking a walk there one day, and a young man started to verbally accost me across the road. Deyalsingh, you're so-and-so. A constituent, yeah. Sorry. So, foul language across the road. This is a true story, so I'm not going to tell you the foul language here. Not here. So anyhow, I decided to cross the road and to engage this young man. This is a true story, I kid you not, on my mother's grave and my father's grave. He cussed me. He cussed Volney. He cussed Stuart Young. He cussed Carlos John. He cussed every member of parliament for every party for 10 years. So I said, brother, what have we done as parliamentarians to you? He said, MP, you see you? 9 years now by looking for a job. 9 years. I said, okay. I said, well, what have you been doing to get this job? And we have a former chairman of the Sanwa Laventille Regional Corporation in our midst, and a former chairman of Digger Martin, so he will know what I'm talking about. He said, Olia, you, Stuart Young, Volney, Carlos John, waste of time. I said, what have we done you, my brother? He said, every Thursday for 9 years, I go down to the corporation and put down my name on the book to get a work. Which corporation? Sanwa Laventille. Where's the chairman? Doesn't matter. He said he can't get a work yet. I said, well, my brother, if after year 1, you ain't get the work, if after year 2, you ain't get the work, after year 3, doesn't that tell you something? He said, what? I said, well, maybe they have no jobs there for you. He said, well, I want to work. I said, okay, what passes you have? None. I leave school at 12. I say, you went to YTEP? No. But I had 3 children to mine. And I need to work for $10,000 a month. Right? This is what you get as a member of parliament. And this, yeah, I'll come into that. And he says, the only time I get help was with live sport. I'm telling you. No, he told me that. He said the only time I get help was when Anil Roberts brought live sport into a particular part of St. Joseph. I wouldn't call the community's name. He must make $1 million. I said, and I said, that is your salvation, my brother. Another constituent, and this is why we have to tackle the gang membership. Another constituent from that same area came to me. He said, MP, I want to work. I said, okay, what passes you have? None. Left school, can't read, can't write. I said, okay. I'm going to send you to Alta in Curep. Alta was running some classes in Curep. He said, but I have no money for transport. I said, I will give you the money. He said, I have no clothes to wear. I said, I will buy the clothes. I buy some clothes for him. I give him 1 month passage instead of coming to me every week to go Curep. After 2 weeks of Alta classes, he comes back to me and says he dropped out. I said, why you drop out? Because this was a young man who I wanted to save, who wanted to be saved. He said, MP, when I put on them clothes and they see me going to Alta, they threaten me and tell me if I continue that, they will beat me up. The gang in the area pulled him down. He can't escape the clutches of the gang. He said, MP, you tried to help me. I'm grateful. And you know what he did? He even gave me back the extra 2 weeks passage. I said, keep it, brother. And that is what we have to deal with in communities. And that is what this bill is designed to do, to break the back of these gang leaders who have their clutches in the uneducated, the people who have never been loved by a parent. And let me tell the country this, Madam Speaker, how much more time I have, please?
13.
Thank you. And when I tell constituents who come to me, and this is another true story, coming out of a grocery, Val Park Shopping Plaza grocery about 6 months ago, there is a lady selling sweetbread outside of the door. This is another true story. The lady said, you are the Minister of Health? I said, yes. She said, here now, my son just leave school. I'm looking for a walk for him. Give him a walk in the mortuary to push dead people now. I said, madam, hold on, mash your brakes. I say, your son is 18 years old, and the ambition you have for your son is that he should start off his working life in a mortuary pushing dead people? No, I mean, we could make jokes, but the point I want to make, we need to have ambition for our constituents. And how do we do that? We are not on the streets 24 hours a day. We will interact with them for a few hours a month. But we are not in their homes. We are not in their communities. But the police could go in there and remove the bad influences. And this is why I said, if we want to tackle this thing about gangs, gang membership is multi-pronged. Yes, as Naparima said, you need some sort of social intervention. But you also need legislation. You also need the police to have the powers to go in there and do what they have to do. Go in there and do what they have to do. Because many of these young boys don't want to be in gangs, you know. But they have no choice. That's where they find salvation. because they have no education, that's where they find success. They don't find success at home or in school, but they find success in gangs. So we have to have this piece of legislation. This is patriotic. This is time for all patriotic citizens to stand up and say, I draw a line in the sand against gangs and gang members, and we are going to support this legislation. Because to do otherwise will be to perpetuate all of this that we have been doing.
That's right.
Madam Speaker, I will close with my last true story. Pastor in my community speaking to her 2 Sundays ago. I said, Pastor, you and I often get blamed for not doing enough for our communities. These were her words. She says, MP, this is like having a cliff, a precipice, with a barrier. If these young men choose to jump the barrier, fall over the cliff, then all we are ambulance drivers. Because all we are called upon to do is to drive the ambulance, pick up the dead and mangled body. But she said, what we in the church are offering, maybe the people don't want. Those were her words, not my words. She says she is tired being an ambulance driver at the bottom of the precipice when these young men mainly take a conscious decision, could climb the barrier and jump off and have their lives snuffed out by age 25, because that's the life expectancy for a life member, for a gang member. But she says, MP, what you and I are offering, salvation, hard work, delayed gratification, how do we combat that? We are not on the streets. But who is on the street is the gang member. So, Madam Speaker, we need strong legislation to deal with gang members. And with those few words, Madam Speaker, I thank you.
Member for Superior.
Very much, Madam Speaker. I did have the opportunity to listen to the speakers, even though I may not have been in the chamber. And I'm sorry for my friend Laventil West, who felt that we were in another place. But like you, Madam Speaker, I returned to the country last night. We both returned. Why? Because we had to be here in the Parliament. I could have had a few more days. But I felt it my patriotic duty on behalf of the opposition that I lead, that we can join in this very important debate. I've been reading over the past several days the comments made by members from the other side and today. And the Honourable Member St. Joseph, you know, I heard you saying repeatedly that we are hypocrites, hypocrisy, because we supported 96% of legislation brought by us when we were on the other side, yes? We supported all except 2. And may I say those 2, you may want to reconsider them, huh? Because those 2 may make a bigger dent in the fight against crime than the one that we have for us today. And so I heard you with this, and you said you supported them, okay. And there must be a reason why you supported them. Your answer may be that you supported these bills because you're good people. That is the impression I'm getting from listening to your contribution earlier today, just a while ago. You know, we are good people. We are great people on that side. And so we helped you, we supported you, and so we go on. But you know why you supported those pieces of legislation? Because it was good law. It was good law. And you're good people, so you supported, you brought good legislation. And we have said repeatedly, we will support good law, good bills, good policy initiatives, good legislation, and we will do that. As long as we are here, we will continue to support good law. So I give you that commitment. And therefore, I know government, opposition.
Madam Speaker, 53F, please.
But I just want to remind you of the provisions of Standing Order 53 with respect to listening in silence, speaking with hushed tones. Please continue, Member for Superior.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah. So we will support good law. And we are all here, I think, we all understand, not just opposition and government, but throughout the country, there is great cause for alarm with the murder and the mayhem and the rising tide of crime. the crime scourge. People have become not just prisoners in their homes. First we had the burglar proofing. Everybody's trying to put burglar proofing, so we have prisoners in there. And now we have become statistics in our own homes. You add to the murder rate. How much is it now? 466. Already surpassed the rate from last year. Now, we have in this government 3 ministers of national security. We have 3 AGs, or wannabe AGs in the office of the AG. 3. And we have virtually, in reality, 3 prime ministers. The real prime minister, the minister in the office of the prime minister, and of course the perpetual actor who's acted for, I think, 18 or 17 times as prime minister member for Diego Martinez, Northeast. And so we have all of this. And here we are today, where the government, which accuses us of hypocrisy, doesn't remember their own words. They blame us. Some comments came out earlier this week on this bill. Crime rising, blame Kamla. Blame Bascom. I want to read these words here. A quotation from none other than the Honorable Prime Minister, who was then opposition leader. And this is what he said. I think he would clearly remember it. He pronounced to the country that when in opposition, and he was then, the Honourable Member was then in opposition, if a government cannot deal with crime, then the government is part of the problem. That's what he said. That is what your leader told the country then. So where is the blame game on the opposition side? If you can't deal with the crime, well, you know what to do. You cannot deal with this clear 460 murders. Since you came into office over the past 2+ years, I think we have over 1,000 murders have taken place in this country. And that is endemic to the PNM, and I have the stats. Whenever the PNM comes into power, crime exponentially rises, always rises. So here we are all concerned. We are here because over the last several days, I'm told about 21 murders over the past several days. You know, and I'm going to come back to the point. 3 persons in office of the AG, 3 in office of national security, and of course 2 office of the Prime Minister. All of you as leaders. And a few weeks ago, the social media went viral with somebody saying that there's going to be an increase in gangs and in criminal activity. And I do believe, Madam Speaker, that the Minister of National Security came and said that's not real, it's not true. But did we do any checking? Did we do any following? Did we do any intelligence? Because just a few weeks later, in December, they said it would happen in December, and here we are, the first week in December, 21 murders. Did anybody really check that when you came and you blasted that social media post? But did you do anything else apart from saying it's not true? So fine, it's not true. But did we check? Because how come we have, immediately after that came out, it's happening in December. We surpassed last year's rate already, the number of murders for the year. And here we are in December. So I asked if a speaker on the other side could help us with that. Was any investigation done apart from saying, I don't like this, so it's not true? The two are so closely linked. That viral post. And that's where I'll come back and support my colleague from St. Augustine on the issue of sedition. I will return to that point. And member for St. Joseph, you told us, okay, tell you something and we'll consider and we'll tell you. And I will want to deal with that sedition clause. But the most important responsibility of any government, whether it's ours, whether it's yours, or any government in any part of the world, the first is to protect its citizens. That's it first. And that protection is enshrined in the very first part of our Bill of Rights in our Constitution. Life, liberty, limb protection, your life, limb, property. That's the first. And that has totally been breached and is being breached every single day in this country. Every day. So the government has totally failed to protect its citizens, madam. That is my respectful view. And so when you say we are talking against you or we are unpatriotic and so on, I want you, really, you talked about the gentleman who didn't get a job for 9 years and so on, right? And you say the chairman is here, maybe that chairman could explain why they didn't give them the job at the SAR, maybe he was not qualified. Lest you walk out there. There are so many cases like that. In this country today, because of all the job losses, there are so many citizens cannot have a job. They come into our offices, they're crying, look, this is Christmas, I can't buy some of my children. I can't even buy a little toy. But worse than that, I can't even buy food. I'm in wherever I was away, madam. And my phone is ringing, oh God, I'm rich. I can't even buy food. So this joblessness also contributes. I'm not saying it's the cause of the crimes, but it's also a contributing factor to crime. So here we are. When we thought it couldn't get any much worse, when we thought that enough blood had been shed in streets and homes and elsewhere, when we thought, okay, maybe it's Trinidad, you know, Trinidad this, Trinidad that, Tobago as well. Peaceful, beautiful Tobago as well. Blood, blood everywhere, soaking into the soil. And no one, from the highest to the lowest to the middle, has been spared from the criminal and the activity. And you know, I find it very surprising. I think the Honorable Attorney General did make a statement, but it is 21 murders over the past 5 days. You know, I thought it would have been appropriate for one of those persons in the office of the Prime Minister, at least, or at best, the Prime Minister himself would have made a statement to the nation. He should have come out and tell us, look, we bring anti-gang, yes, but what else are we doing? Because this anti-gang is not going to stop it, you know. If you think this is a panacea for the ills of crime, this will not. It will not on itself. It will not. And if you, on the other side, in your contributions, can show us how this bill, and I've listened to your speakers, show us how this bill, you said, we have to get rid of gangs, we have to deal this, we have to do that, we have to do that. You know there are about 2,000 gang members. Yes, oh, very frightening. But how will the things inside of here, show me, take me through it, tell me please, so that you can convince us on this side to give you the support that you want for this bill. And I say we will support anything that will help in the best interest of this country. So take us through the clauses. I think Policeman North may speak next. Take us through and show us. Maybe we are not as bright as you are. So show us, clause this will help here, this will help here, this will help there. Show us that. I haven't seen that from your comments thus far, nor have I seen it in reading of the bill itself. So here we are, an extraordinary sitting of the Parliament, madam. Why is it extraordinary? Well, it's Wednesday. We don't normally sit on Wednesday. Why is it extraordinary? Secondly, because you had started at 10 a.m. That's an extraordinary sitting. And we do these things, madam, which the Parliament allows to do. Some of us had to leave where we were, of course, for this extraordinary sitting. We do that. Nothing is wrong with it. And given the spate of crime, the question is whether rushing this thing late Friday, with the changes, by the way, laying it on Friday and say we're debating it on Wednesday. Well, a few days to really consider. So when others on the other side say, we didn't respond, we didn't give any this, we didn't give any that, you gave us a few days. You had sent to me in August sometime back, August 4th, the letter from the Honorable Prime Minister, which I very much appreciated. 28th September, sorry. No, this is the one I wrote in response. That version of this bill that was sent to us was different from the one now before the Parliament in a few regards, and I welcome some of those changes. I trust that the comments we had sent would have made some differences, so that you made some, August 4th was to the Senator, and thereafter Honourable Prime Minister wrote to me. So, here it is. Prime Minister wrote on August 17th to me. There were some comments there. There were criticisms all along with that the original one that we had passed, which is being referred to all the time here. There's our bill, it's the same bill. There's nothing fundamentally different. There are things that are fundamentally different, by the way. You say there's nothing fundamentally different. So you know what? It's your bill. Well, I find after 2 years that you recycle a bill from the partnership and say, look, it's the same. Vote for it. Because you voted that, vote now. That is the kind of pressure being exerted in opposition. You voted that, vote now. But the world is not static. The world doesn't stay the same. It changes. And therefore, the gangs are changing too, because they're getting bigger, they're getting more of them, and they're getting more sophisticated with their weaponry and their methods and the technology. I mean, this technology is all over. Everything is changing. So, yes, we have to change it. You can't bring it exactly as this and say, vote because you did it before. So two pressures being put. One, you're hypocrites. You're hypocrites. You voted for it then. What's wrong now? What's wrong? We share it with you what we believe is wrong. So out of these 21 people who were murdered, madam, in the last several days, oh God, the Christmas, the holy month of December. It's 21 persons. I'm being disturbed from the other side, Madam Speaker. I'm sorry to have to ask for your protection.
Members, please, I would like to hear the contribution from the Honorable Member Superior. Please continue.
Very much. Out of these 21 persons murdered, out of the over 1,000 murdered since you came into office, how many of those are gang-related? Do we know? Do we have any idea, Honorable Attorney General? Sure. No, you didn't. No, I heard him. Maybe you could tell us again. You gave us the statistics. You said there are 33 or 40 in the magistrates' courts and so on that are pending. And there are over 2,000 gang members, suspected, you said, suspected gang members and so on. What I'm asking, out of these 21 people who were murdered in the last several days, because we are saying this will help that, it will help stem that, are any of these gang-related? Are any of these gang-related? So, for example, was a gang or gang member responsible for the death of Mr. Ramdath, 33, met his death in a home invasion? Was that a gang? Was the outpatient from St. Anne's who murdered Anderson Babwa, 22, who fed him every day, was he a gang member? Was Dwayne Callender, whom his family said was at the wrong place at the wrong time, was that gang-related? Was the killing of Dul Lachman, Jola from Tobago, is it gang-related? Because if it's not, then this is not going to help all these murders. Last night, another citizen lost his life, shot to death in Couva. What's that? Gang-related. So, Honorable AG, or members of the government, can you tell us, could we have, with this bill, helped save any of those lives? Yes. Of these 21 people? Are they gang-related murders? And therefore, I ask again, tell us how this legislation will help to prevent. Give us the details for that, which I asked for. So it's very important, I think, we ask this question, because you're proposing that we pass this piece of legislation. This is your solution, or one-off, because you spoke of a suite of legislation, one-off to what we've been experiencing over the past several days and several months and 2 years. I would ask, respectfully, for you to tell us and tell the country how this would stop the murders, how this will make our country safer for our children, for elderly, for fathers, for sons, for daughters, for wives. How? Please tell us. So we see you bring this here. Did you rush it through from Friday to now? Because what you sent to us is not this. What you sent to us initially in August and September. I believe what you sent to the Law Association is not this. What you sent to the judiciary, what you sent to the DPP, who did not respond, as you say, it's not what we have before us. That is my understanding of it. What was sent was the one from way back in August, but you've made some changes, some of which have made improvements from what came here before. So, now the persons that you are proposing to be responsible for detection and prosecution of persons under this piece of legislation are the same persons who admitted that there was a gap in intelligence which caused the Beatham mayhem, the anarchy we saw on the brink of our capital city. It was that same gap, and it is that same gap in intelligence that was responsible for persons thinking that they could do unlawful things and get away with it. So will you kindly give us some comfort to innocent citizens who go about their lawful business every day? How, again, this will prevent another occurrence of what happened on the Beatham. You know, when we were in office, we did several things. We were able to bring serious crime down to about the lowest in 31 years. After consistent efforts and unrelenting commitment to take back our communities, by 2014, we recorded the lowest number of serious crimes, as I say, in 31 years. And I have the stats, say, if you're doubting me, I can pass it and share it with you. Serious crime was cut by almost half. Almost half. Burglaries, robberies, car crimes were all down by more than half. Half. Drug crimes came down by more than 15%. Shootings down by 19%. Kidnappings went down. And murders went down by more than 1/5. 1/5. which is 20%. 20%. So how did we achieve this? It was not just through legislation. It cannot be through the legislation alone. And when you come and say, you know, I'm listening to you, the contributors from the other side earlier today, and it's like, you're not supporting this, you're a hypocrite, you're a traitor, and what is the other word? You're unpatriotic and so on. And then when we raise other issues, you jump off on that issue and say, you're not supporting this. And Navrima said, let's go back to drill down and go there and prepare, go back to kindergarten, go to preschool. All those things are needed. It has to be a holistic plan. And whilst you tell us about this bill and its importance, why are we here to debate this bill? Why do we want it? Is to bring down the crime. But this, I repeat, of itself, will not assist. Madam, I'm being disturbed by the members on the other side.
Honorable members, please, I think we all understand the limitations of the chamber, and could we please cooperate, observe Standing Order 53. I would not like to rise again on this. Continue,
Thank
please,
you,
Madam.
Madam. So I'm saying we were able to bring it down. What were some of the things we did? And why is it that you're dismantling these initiatives that was able to work and bring crime down? So we established a National Operations Center. Why? To be the backbone for intelligence gathering. Remember earlier, I said to you, I repeated what I read, where the national security personnel said that the Beta matter was a gap in intelligence. You have totally watered down that National Operations Center. That was to be the hub, that's the backbone for intelligence gathering. That's what it was doing. Sharing information among law enforcement agencies so they do not operate in silos. They will work all together. That is what the National Operations Center was for. What did you do with the National Operations Center? Dismantled and put it into something called the SSA, if I'm not mistaken. And SSA, that is itself an intelligence gathering unit, cannot gather any intelligence over Beta. Cannot. Most countries, developed countries, where crimes are not like ours, they have a National Operations Center. They may call it a different name, but that is what intelligence gathering and intelligence sharing amongst law enforcement. We also set up a National Security Specialized Operations Group. This was a specialized group comprising members of the law enforcement agencies. I heard my colleague from St. Augustine earlier talking about when he was chair of the LRC and how the consultations, they were regular meetings. There were regular meetings. I'm being told that is not happening. Regular meetings with the judiciary, DPP. You had scheduled meetings, not just I write you a letter, I send you, I make a phone call. But you had scheduled meetings to take place. So you will have this ongoing consultation because the fight against crime is a war that we are not winning at this time. And therefore you have to keep everyone. You don't just call them and you summon all heads. When something happens, you see, busy. Everybody come. Commissioner, bring all your troops, bring the troops. We sung in a place somewhere, we take some nice pictures, and that's it. This should be ongoing. So yes, you want a piece of legislation, but you have to do more than just pass it. We formally established an energy sector security initiative that looks at the protection of our critical energy infrastructure. Is it still there? Because one day you might wake up and we hear Petrotrin, something happens. Energy, and we did that because with the threat of ISIS, that's when we set that up. I remember going to the United Nations and we co-signed with President Barack Obama, who was the pilot of that motion, the UN resolution on terrorism. And my colleague who was then in opposition, the present Prime Minister, lambasted us all over. Why must we do that? Now everybody come looking for us. Thank God we had co-signed with President Obama. The ISIS threat that is now coming in. So we had set up this energy sector security initiative. Okay, is it still there? Do they keep a watch? Do they do protection, monitoring, and surveying of our critical? That's the source of our income. That is the source of our income. We launched the E99. We saw a very heavy increase in law enforcement presence throughout the country. And you see that bill that you condemned, one that the member admitted today they didn't support, two, what you call, pejoratively. You use it in a very negative way when you said the soldier bill. Not soldier, soldier bill.
Soldier police.
Soldier bill.
Soldier police.
Yes, that's what you termed it. Today if you had that, you want to bring the community zones, which is not on the order paper, so you have a policy initiative to bring bill about zones, special zones and things. What are you going to be doing there? You know, that's what they're trying to do in a different way. But that one would have made a great difference because you have 5,000 defense force personnel and maybe another 5,000 police. I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but we have thousands of defense force police. Why can't they not work? In a place like Costa Rica, I remember meeting the president of Costa Rica at one of these meetings, and she said they totally abolished the defense force and took the money and pumped it into infrastructure, into education, into social service. I am not today, anybody with the headline camera says get rid of the defense force. That's not what I'm saying. I want to make that very clear. I'm saying let's incorporate them and use them. And they are very able and willing, well-trained regimental persons. So we had that heavy presence. I know there's a joint task force of police. They're located somewhere along the east-west corridor. I remember visiting there with those officers and so on. We need to see more presence. You know, we'd set up these bays on the highway. I think it's 13 surveillance bays. Have you ever seen a police car there? That's what they were for. Those bays along the highway were to have police presence. So you see that visibility. Madam, you have traveled, most people have traveled. When you go abroad, what do you see? You see the police are most present. You see that alone is a deterrent. Just seeing law enforcement personnel visible. So we need higher visibility of law enforcement. And you have the space, you have the base, they're built. You don't have to spend any more money on that. You just need to deploy the personnel. We also launched the community comfort patrols. Now I understand they've been disbanded. That is one of the things that helped us to bring the crime down. We banned the use of these cell phones while you're driving when we amended the motor vehicle. We established a counter-human trafficking unit. Several things. We increased the CCTVs. We launched the CCTV center in Tobago. We opened up the police post on Duncan Street. We built a Rima, Piaco, Maloney, Komuto, Brasso, Labre, Oropuch, Baruga police stations. And notice not one is in a UNC constituency. Not one. But you say we are racist, and you say we are biased, and you say we are partisan. Every time you speak, you say we did nothing. Elsewhere, we worked for the entire country. We took care of the entire country. And those coastal vessels now from the Coast Guard, you know, no ships came in, the ones that came in and so on. Before Ostal, I think it was. And the MVCU, which we spent so much money on and never won the sale. Millions. How much is it? $52 million. Never sale. MVCU. I think somebody's spouse's name Sue, I think. And the boat was named MV Sue. So here we are. Those patrol vessels now doing so good on the seas. We were lambasted, blazed. Remember Diego Martin Ortiz, who is now disturbing me again. Remember Diego Martin Ortiz said those ships as a tin can. What do you call it? A dinghy. Yeah. Like a little pirogue or something. That his yacht was stronger than that, you see. My yellow boat was great. Thank you. Thank you. I didn't have to pay for that boat. The villagers had it for their floods because they get flooded out all the time. And so, can you help us then? Can you help us then? To take food, yes. Can you tell us then? As I shared some of the initiatives, some of which you have shut down. Maybe you'll tell us why. Maybe, you know, the government, some people say the government is like Scrooge now, because we can't even have Christmas parties. So maybe you didn't have the money, so you shut these programs down. Tell us why. Because they help. That's why we were able to bring the crime down. So help us now to understand how this will make the place safer. How it will ensure that we are no longer prisoners and statistics and targets in our homes. Tell us how this would help law enforcement in detecting persons involved in criminal activity. Tell us how. Show me in that bill. To detect, I'm waiting with bated breath for you to tell me. In detecting persons involved in criminal activity, those who are planning to commit acts and so on, tell us how this bill will help. Because you see, this bill will only kick into action when you detect the crime. So you can't charge no money on the anti-gang, can you? Unless you find them. You have to catch them. Of the 1,000 murders since you came into office, about 1,000, how many of those murderers have you detected? How many are behind bars? Because they don't get bail. They go in, they don't ever get bail. So the issue of not getting bail helping you to solve the crime is not helping. You have 1,000 murderers. How many you catch? How many is behind bars? Come here every week in this parliament and say, lock up this one, and lock up that one, lock up the other one. You have 1,000 murders. You have more murders. How many? Inside the jails without bail. Because that's what this is going to do with these gang members. You're going to put them in jail without bail, what is it, 120 days or something? No bail. Then you apply to the courts and so on. Help us, please, to tell us how this will help us, help the government and the law enforcement to gather the evidence that we need to prosecute these gang members now. That's a very important point. So yes, all right, we pass this stage, you're going to catch them, you're going to put them behind bars. No bail for them. You now have to go to court to prosecute. What do you need to prosecute that person? Evidence. You need witnesses. You mentioned, I think the member for St. Joseph mentioned, you know, the story about the gang pulling the person down and the fella, oh, the guy with the clothing and so on. Yeah. They tell him take off that clothes and whatever, the person kept him down. You have to get evidence to convict. That's what you're doing, just to get a conviction. I see you've decreased the penalty from 25 years it was to 20 years, if I'm not mistaken. That's what you want. How are you going to convict them? Who will be the witness? If this guy is afraid to even put on a nice set of clothes and walk his village, which of these will come forward to give evidence? They will only do it if you have a properly functioning justice protection, witness protection. I think from my research and from those who helped me, every country that has this type of legislation, they have been able to secure success because of a proper functioning witness protection program. Yeah, you see, madam, please. I think you want to tell somebody to take a walk, please.
Please continue, members.
So I'm saying, tell me a bit about the Justice Protection Program, the Witness Protection Program, when you respond. Is it functioning? Is it functioning? Is it functioning? The information I have, it is not, but I'm not privy to every piece of information, so I ask the government to share with us. Yes.
Honourable Member for Superior, the original 30 minutes are now spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes if you wish to avail yourself.
Thank you. Tell us about it. And further, please tell us what steps you have taken to implement the systemic changes that has been identified by the DPP about this piece of legislation. Now, you said you sent a bill, fundamentally the same bill that was there before and the act that was there before. And DPP did not respond to you. But the DPP, when this legislation was introduced in 2011, the DPP indicated almost 10 things that were required to make this work. 10 different things. Have you taken that into account? And please update us. He told us there must be proper preparation by law enforcement authorities of cases. Please tell us what steps have been taken to make that happen. He said there should be cooperation rather than competition between law enforcement authorities. Cooperation rather than competition. That's where the NOC was very helpful in coordinating everybody on the same page. Further, there should be proper and current police documentation of gang affiliation and activity, which it seems you now have. Fourth, the development of gang databases. Have we started any of that? Is it there? Please tell us where you are with that step. Step 5, or point 5, the DPP made, employment of informants, development of an informant policy. This is from the DPP. So even though he didn't reply to your letter, he had made it very clear what was necessary for legislation of this type to work. 6, a study of gang dynamics and group criminal behavior. Do we have any? Do we have any of that at all? 7, a proper appreciation of liability as it relates to gangs. 8, the development of a gang unit. Do we have a gang unit functioning now? Is there a gang unit, or do you plan to put it in place after the legislation is passed? Gang unit, DPP says. 9, effective surveillance strategies. Effective surveillance strategies. Have we improved with our surveillance strategies? Tell us, please. And 10, the employment of gang experts who are thoroughly conversant with gang dynamics in TNT. These are the 10 points that the DPP had indicated needed to be done, initiatives needed to take place to make the thing work properly. So we wait to hear how many of these systems have been put in place or when they will be put in place. No, some might be done now, some might be done after you pass it. So what has been the view of the DPP? Well, I heard the Honorable AG that he did not respond. Did we send him the redrafted piece of legislation? I don't know. I don't think so. We got it only on Friday. So we still don't know with this new piece, the new changes. Why we did not support it when it came before? When you brought it back? You had brought it for after sunset, well, after the sun had set on it. You had brought it. The legislation that was brought then was identical to the 2011, no changes, okay? That bill was subject to serious criticism by the courts in the case of Justin Charles and the AG. And if we had passed it in that form, it would have been struck down as unconstitutional by the courts. We couldn't support it then. Then we came to the criticism from the DPP himself, who shared all these points that needed to be put in place. That had not happened when you brought the bill, the identical thing back a while back. Further, the Law Association and the Criminal Bar was, very adverse criticism against that version of it. And of course, as you well know, no stats were provided. I think the Honourable Prime Minister did send me some statistics, and the Honourable AG has shared some of that today with us. So, further, we did not support it then. I'm looking today now, if you want our support, St. Joseph, I don't know if you spoke for the rest of the gang or you spoke for yourself. When St. Joseph said, there are no criminals here either. There are no criminals here either, sir. St. Joseph, when you spoke, when the Honourable Member spoke, I don't know if that was on your own behalf or on behalf of the government, when you said, tell us, what do we want? So you speak for all. Tell us.
I said, would you agree to either a sunset clause or a review clause? Tell us.
Sure. Okay, so you've asked us to share our thoughts on this matter.
Please direct
I'm sorry?
your contribution, member.
Yes, ma'am.
Please direct your contribution this week.
To your good self. Thank you. So we need to also be told what steps have been taken with GTPS for successful implementation of this piece of law. And then we come to what steps have been taken. We have thousands of very good law enforcement officers in our country, but we also have corrupt officers who give the rest of the service a bad name. What steps are being taken, or have been taken, to weed out those elements? Because that's important. They are the ones who have to arrest you, and then thereafter with the DPP lay the charges. And in this whole scenario, the prison service plays an essential part in the fight against crime. They have been crying out to government for protection, as their members are also now under siege. We await for you to tell us how you will secure our prison officers who risk their lives and the lives of their families in service of our country every day. Their cry has remained unanswered to date. You know, I remember when we were in office, we did something, and I know the Honourable Prime Minister at one point in this Parliament, this 11th Parliament, as Prime Minister, talked about the morale and boosting morale. I remember when there was a long, drawn-out period where the increases in salary couldn't be made. And the officer said, look, help us. We gave a non-taxable $1,000 per month. Put into place for all law enforcement officers. We said if something happens to you in the line of duty and you're killed, your family will get $1 million. Government came to us and said we have to pass legislation. Well, I'm waiting 2 years later, no legislation here. Some persons have benefited, but there is no legislation that was brought with respect to the payments of those money. So they're being given the money as an No, they're not all paid, so don't do that. Madam, they're doing it as ex gratia payments, as a whim and fancy of the cabinet. If there is law, if the legislation is done, yes, everyone It doesn't have to go to the cabinet to say, I'm going to pay the family of this officer today, I'm going to pay that one next year or 3 years down the road. The law will standardize the process, the procedure, the application, that everyone will be equally treated. Equally treated. So there's no time frame. But if you have the law, there'll be a time frame. Within 6 months, that money must be processed and paid. The breadwinner, the officer, law enforcement is gone. No legislation came here when we asked. When we asked about it, that was the reply given by the government that we have to bring legislation. Do you all remember that? Yes. We have to bring legislation. No, 2 years later, none. So here we are now. Here we are now. You know, when I went to recently to the Bahamas, I think our colleague from Lavendale West was very concerned about where I was. It was a great place.
Speaker, just 53, please. I have 5 more, my member, 5 more minutes approximately. Can I hear in silence?
Member, please continue. Member Zipper, please continue.
Thank you, yes. Very concerned about this visit that we had. It was a great visit. They treated us very nicely, and I thank the Bahamian people for their hospitality. But whilst I was there, I was so reminded of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Whilst I was there, you know how we have soca and kaiso and chutney and so on, and parang? I'll tell you in a minute. And why you want to know that? I mean, be real. So we were there, and I asked the driver, I said, what is your music? We have soca, kaiso, chutney, parang, and so on. What is your music? And he said, rake and scrape. That's their music, rake and scrape. And I was so reminded of this government, who they have failed in every regard. They have failed as a rake and scrape government. Raking and scraping, rake and scrape. I mean, they'll rake and scrape every last cent. The problem is they already took away the cent. We don't have a cent again. No cent in this country, gone. So I was reminded of rake and scrape government. So here we are. When I was Prime Minister, we had a majority on that side, which you do not have now, the constitutional majority. We could have passed that law, the anti-gang law. We passed it in 2011. We could have passed it on our own without your support. Yes. 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 It needed a special majority. We had sufficient votes to give us a special majority. But because this was a new law, this was breaching and infringing rights and so on, we put the sunset clause in. We put the sunset clause in. So it said, Joseph, we want the sunset clause. And I shall be proposing an amendment at the committee stage. Secondly, I have serious difficulty with the insertion in the first schedule of sedition. My colleague from St. Augustine spoke about it. Sedition. Because I could be talking to my colleague here, the two of us know, because you've changed the definition of gang, 2 persons or more, 2. I could be talking to any one of us. And listen, if you go outside there, I've been out and about a little bit. I was campaigning, by the way, Madam Speaker, so I was out a lot in the last several weeks of campaign or party elections. A lot of people, right? And 2 people, 5 people, 10 people. The majority of people bad talking this government.
Yes. Yeah. Everybody.
And when I came out of the when I came out of the campaign, in the few minutes I have left. No, I'm not surprised. Not at all. Madam, I have 3 minutes left. So, that was in the UNC campaign amongst the UNC. Then I completed the campaign, which I won, by the way. Completed an award. And when I completed that campaign, then I met other people. So I'm in the airport. I'm going out to shop because I get a chance to do anything. In Trinidad here, you know, you go buy little things to eat and so on. Yeah. And there, they were not UNC people and they were bad talking. This and we should know that because from the polling done recently and done in September and so on, the majority of the people are dissatisfied with this government which is failing, has failed, and will continue to fail. And I say, sunset clause, delete sedition because you'll have to lock up everybody in Trinidad for sedition. My colleague from St. Augustine gave you the definition of sedition from the Sedition Act and so on. I will not repeat that, time permitting. So, given that act, you remember some police officer was charged for sedition? I think it was Officer Seals. Officer Seals. Yes, in 2016, for something he said on TV, he was charged. In fact, he was attacking us, I think. He said the partnership did certain things and so on. Anyway, he was charged under this government for sedition. Guess what? He won the case. The case was dismissed against him. So, given the amount of seditious talk, in brackets, not criminal sedition, where people just standing on the street corner, or standing in the bank line, or standing in the supermarket line, and they say, oh God, they wish this government will just rake and scream and go. That's what they say. And just go, will you lock them up? Anything that we say anti-government, we could be locked up for that. And all you need is two of us. So madam, it could be me and my spouse, my son, my daughter, or it could be Fuad walking down the street. With a goodly lady in the chair. Any two people. And you just say one bad word. Lock up. So, madam, my two comments I would ask the government to look at. Put in the sunset clause so that you can come back and report to see if this thing worked or did not work. And also, remove sedition from the schedule. I thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as those on the other side congratulate the Honourable Member for Siparia, I rise to respond and also to contribute on behalf of Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West. Madam Speaker, I sat and I took copious notes. I listened very attentively and very carefully to the member for Siparia. And my first observation that I'd like to alert to the population of Trinidad and Tobago that after 45 minutes, it was in the last 3 minutes, we got the only 2 suggestions to amendments to the bill. So after 45 minutes of contribution from the Leader of the Opposition, we have 2 proposed amendments to this bill, a sunset clause and the removal of sedition. Madam Speaker, with the greatest of respect, this responsible government, after a meeting between the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition in July of this year, sent to the opposition on the 4th of August, the beginning of August, and I actually signed the letter, Madam Speaker. We sent to the opposition because they had said on the previous occasion when they failed to support the anti-gang legislation that they didn't have statistics and they didn't have information. I would like to put on the record once again on the 4th of August 2017, pursuant to the instruction of the Leader of the Opposition as to who it should be sent to, this government sent draft legislation to the opposition along with all of the supporting data, statistics and information since the 4th of August 2017. We even offered, Madam Speaker, and the population needs to know this, to meet with them at their request at a mutually convenient time and to sit with the drafts people, the CPC's department and all other experts to amend the legislation during consensual discussion. Trinidad and Tobago, there was no response. Trinidad and Tobago, they did not take us up with that very, very serious offer that we made. But what happened is after we kept saying we're not hearing from you, on the 28th of September, so this serious piece of legislation, we only received a response. That response was sent to the Prime Minister on the 28th of September. And in that response, very little was said. A lot of commentary was made and a lot of complaints were made, but nothing said of substance with respect to the bill. So it is quite inaccurate, once again, for the opposition to come here and to suggest to the population that it was only on Friday this was put to them. The only changes made to what we sent to them in August and now were actually extractions. We took out stuff from the proposed legislation, not getting any response from them.
Madam Speaker, may I invite you to look at Standing Order 53? We cannot hear. our speaker on this side, because Siparia is making.
Okay. So, honorable members, I recognize that there's a lot of energy and it's a very lively debate, but I want to warn all members to be reminded of the provisions of Standing Order 53. I think we all recognize that we have limitations in this chamber and our behavior has to suit our physical environment. Please continue.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, unlike the previous speaker, I will not be seeking the protection. If they want to listen, they will listen. If they don't want to listen, they don't have to listen. The population will be the ones who will test us here today and who are looking on. Madam Speaker, again, for the population and in particular the civic-minded citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, this legislation is not legislation that the government of the day is asking for. This is legislation that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and other law enforcement agencies are screaming, begging, and pleading with us to bring to the Parliament. We have our suspicions as to why it may not be, because I still believe that over on the other side, there are those who may be concerned about what goes on in this country. They claim to be patriots. At the end of today, we will see if they are patriots. Because this is not a P&M bill. This is not a P&M bill. This is a bill to protect the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And again, I repeat, as I will come to in a short while, it is the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service asking for this bill. Another point to be made, Madam Speaker, because it can't be made enough times. This legislation, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this legislation was first brought to the House by those on the other side. And I heard the arrogance a short while ago for the member for Siparia, which is unlike her, but the arrogance of the member of Siparia, she stood and told the country that they did not need the support of the then opposition, that they had a constitutional majority and they could have done it without the support of the opposition. Because this opposition is on record as reflected in the Hansard and in the historical records of having supported the legislation. This opposition, now in government, is pleading on behalf of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago for us to give to the police service what it is they've asked for. Unlike those on the other side, when they pass the legislation, we have been building out with the police service and the intelligence service all of the points that the member for Siparia just referred to that was requested by the DPP. All of those points have been ticked. There is now the intelligence that has been converted to evidence. There is now a specialized unit, and it surprises me that as a former chairperson of the National Security Council, the member for Siparia did not know that under her tenure in the police service, there existed a specialized unit called the Criminal Gang Investigation Unit. She stood there a few minutes ago, and I didn't interrupt her, but she stood there a few minutes ago, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Silence.
The member for Siparia stood there a few minutes ago and told this country she doesn't know if there's a gang unit. Well, we have gone better than that now. She is Naparima.
Members. Member, I'm on my legs. I'm on my legs. Members, please, again, honorable member, identify the member for Siparia appropriately and all other members accordingly by their proper titles or by using the word member accordingly. And silence as the member continue. Proceed.
Thank you very much. Mr. Deputy Speaker, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, a short while ago we had a contribution by the leader of the opposition, the member for Siparia. And during that contribution, the member for Siparia made it quite clear that one of the tick items that the Director of Public Prosecutions was asking for was a specialized gang unit. The simple point is it existed under their tenure. They did nothing to assist that unit. And now under this tenure, that unit has been merged with the OCNFB and is now called something called the OCIU, which is the Organized Crime Intelligence Unit. And they have been doing exactly that. In fact, now might be an appropriate time. One of the questions asked by the member for Siparia is what have the police service asked for. The OCIU unit has produced a document called the Reenactment of Anti-Gang Act 2017. And this is their plea for this legislation. And it starts, if I may be permitted to quote from it. The now defunct anti-gang legislation of 2011, under the former UNC administration, provided an essential deterrent in the commission of serious crimes committed by violent, organized criminal gangs in Trinidad and Tobago. She in Naparima is disturbing me.
As usual.
Members, honorable member, first of all, if it's Naparima you're referring to, it's not. Members. Right, as I was saying, if it's Naparima you're referring to, please ensure that you have the proper gender to quote. All right? I know it's not a laughing matter, members. It's not a laughing member. Okay? And again, members, as the member proceed, silence.
I will repeat for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and those who are patriotic and who want to listen. The police service, the opposition is asking what is the police service's position. There is now a new unit in the police service that is created to deal with gangs. They have put forward a paper, and if the member for Siparia would listen, the member for Siparia is the one who asked for the information. The now defunct anti-gang legislation of 2011 provided an essential deterrent in the commission of serious crimes committed by violent organized criminals in Trinidad and Tobago. The Criminal Gang and Intelligence Unit disseminated intelligence to other operational units within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service in disrupting violent gang activities. This form of intelligence shared assisted in disrupting various gang activities between 2012 and 2016, where gang members were prosecuted. So despite what we are being told and being misled by those on the other side, there have been prosecutions for various offenses ranging from possession of firearm and ammunition, murder, trafficking in a dangerous drug, or being in possession of a dangerous drug for the purposes of trafficking and robbery. The Anti-Gang Act came into effect on the 15th of August 2011 and provided a unique platform of focus for the CGIU to target its investigations on individuals who are at the head of criminal gangs, as well as gang members, with a view of gathering evidence to prosecute them for various gang offenses under the Act. Investigations into gang-related criminal activity were more difficult to investigate than other serious related crime because of the interconnected relationships and complex dynamics of criminal gangs. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is an opportune point to remind the nation of one of the failures of intelligence gathering and turning that intelligence into evidence during the period of 2010 to 2015. During the period of 2010 and 2015, those on the other side dismantled the intelligence gathering services of Trinidad and Tobago. They dismantled the facial recognition system. They took out the servers for interception. These are facts. They have never been able to refute it because it is the truth. They dismantled SWAT. They took the Special Forces helicopter that was there on standby and for use by the Special Forces of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force and put it as a VIP helicopter they converted it to a VIP helicopter. And it still cannot be used after that. Madam, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we came in, as is now part of the history, the cost and expense of helicopters and a helicopter service is something that we had to stop. But at that time, under them, rather than allow the helicopter to be used in the fight against crime, it was being used as a shuttle service at the taxpayer's expense. So the member for St. Joseph is right to use the words of unpatriotic and hypocritical behavior by those on the other side. Again, back to the statistics and the request by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and in particular, the specialized unit that has been set up to help in the fight. One of the areas they're fighting is against gang units. The legislation was to some extent feared by members of criminal gangs. Those on the other side, and my friends on the other side, and some of the sensible ones on the other side have been asking the question. They've been saying, provide us with the statistics. Provide us with the request by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service as to why this legislation is necessary. That is what I'm doing. They say the legislation was to some extent feared by members of criminal gangs and provided some limited deterrent on their activities. When arrested, gang members went out of their way to identify with crimes that did not fall under the day-to-day activities of gangs. This trend by gang members meant that the legislation was indeed having an impact on their activities, which inadvertently caused them to consider firstly their response if caught, rather than focus on the success of their criminal pursuits. This left them vulnerable and enabled, where possible, law enforcement to strategically position themselves to conduct arrests. Gangs in Trinidad and Tobago act as a profit-making enterprise, whereby revenue generated from gang-related activities are directed towards sustaining gang activity, personal profit for the leaders of the gangs. Gang violence is often retaliatory in response to petty disagreements or protection of profit and territory. Gang members are shown to possess more illegal firearms now than in the past. Most gang-related homicides are more attributed to drug territory and retaliation. Gang-related activity and violence are increasing as gangs employ violence and intimidatory tactics to control their territory and criminal operations. That is the clearest possible language that can be used by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service as to why they are today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, pleading with the 41 members of Parliament in this chamber. Well, should be 41, all of them are not here. They are pleading with those members of Parliament and asking for this legislation. A short while ago, the member for Siparia wanted to suggested to the population that under her tenure, serious crime reduced. Madam, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I have here the statistics from the police service. Total, you want murders, Naparima? Total gang-related murders for the period 2010. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this bill is about anti-gang legislation. This bill is about fighting gangs. So the best statistic one can use is murders as related to gang activity, which they asked for. So total gang-related murders for the period 2010 to 2017, Trinidad and Tobago. 2010, there were 75 gang-related murders. 2011, pause. 2011 is a year that those on the other side call a state of emergency. That state of emergency right now, up to this point in time, has never been explained by the member for Siparia and her former Attorney General, who is now the subject of criminal charges. In fact, that activity by them, we on this side wrote to them, both the member for Siparia, and I'm putting it here frontally on the record again, on behalf of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, the Attorney General from San Fernando West wrote to the member for Siparia, wrote to Anand Ramlogan, asking them to provide evidence, because all of the people they detained under a state of emergency have now sued the state, and we have to defend their calling of a state of emergency. Both of them refused to provide evidence. They have refused to protect the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago and to explain to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago why they call a state of emergency. So now we are subject to tens of millions of dollars in damages. So let's get back to 20. We are in charge, but we need your evidence, Siparia. And you can't explain, and you've never explained to the population, Siparia, why it is, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Members, according to Standing Order 53, member for Siparia, fine. Standing Order 53, the member supposed to be, as on the floor, you all have to listen in silence. So please, let's ensure. Proceed.
Very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. For those who didn't hear it and for the citizens looking on, In 2011, the member for Siparia is the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and her cabinet colleague, constitutionally a cabinet, is the Prime Minister and the Attorney General, Mr. Anand Ramlogan, called a state of emergency, rounded up people, Mr. Deputy Speaker, rounded up people, carted them off and incarcerated them. They never gave the country of Trinidad and Tobago and our citizens an explanation what that was about. Now that all those people they incarcerated are suing the state and suing us for taxpayers' dollars in damages, the member for Siparia and Anand Ramlogan have refused to give evidence to defend these claims, and it is costing us tens of millions of dollars in damages. Let us get back to 2011. So in 2010, the gang-related murders were 75. In 2011, they went up to 93. In 2012, the gang-related murders under Vancouver South went up to 144. In 2013, it went up to 197. In 2014, it went up to 142. 2015, 141. These are all gang-related murders, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And listen.
Members. Proceed.
Citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, I will repeat these statistics for being disturbed.
Against what she said.
We heard a short while ago from the member of Siparia that serious crime went down under her. We are here today to debate anti-gang legislation. Gang-related murders for the period 2010 to 2017 started at 75 in 2010, went up to 93 in 2011. There was a state of emergency. In 2012, it jumped from 93 to 144 gang-related murders. In 2013, it went up to 197 gang-related murders. The highest ever level of gang-related murders took place in 2013 under the member for Siparia and her cabinet. In 2014, it went to 142. In 2015, it went to 141. It dropped in 2016 due to the work being done by this administration and the fight against crime to 127. It then went so far as at the date of these statistics, which is in June, it stood at 79. I want the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to know the crosstalk taking place from Naparima at this stage is that they are not going to support the anti-gang legislation because he is upset. Let us go now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to the bill, because it is important that the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago who are looking on at this parliament here today know exactly what this bill is being, the attempts that this bill is being made for and what it is about. Because it's not a PNM bill. It is not a bill that is being done for the PNM. It's a bill that is being done for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And I stand here as the representative for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, and make the plea as my colleague from Lavantil West did. Because Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West has its constituency office at the corner of Observatory Street and Quarry Street in Port of Spain, right behind the Harp Place. And it is a fact that out of the 41 constituencies in this House, the most murders for the radius mile of a constituency office take place in Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West. So the people in that constituency are asking for the support of this legislation, for the police service to tackle and fight what is going on with criminality and gangs. Looking at the bill and explaining to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago what this piece of legislation is intended to do. Let's go straight to the definition clause of what gang-related activity means. It means an offense, an attempt to commit an offense, the aiding and abetting, counseling, or procuring an offense. And it ties back to the schedule, to the bill, which is Schedule 4, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Gang-related activity offenses. And let those in this House explain why it is they would not support that gang-related offenses specific to gang activity should not include the possession of imitation firearms in pursuance of a criminal offense. So it is not just the holding, the possession of an imitation firearm, but it is in pursuance of criminal offense. The larceny of a motor vehicle, arson. We had a most heinous crime take place yesterday that involved arson. Receiving stolen goods, gang membership, coercing or encouraging gang membership, preventing a gang member from leaving a gang. There are instances where persons want to turn their life around and they're being prevented from leaving a gang. Right. How could a civic-minded citizen say that should not be a criminal act when you try to prevent someone from leaving a gang? Participation in criminal activity in association with a gang. Possession of bulletproof vests, firearm, ammunition, or prohibited weapon for the benefit of a gang. Harboring or concealing gang members. Mr. Deputy Speaker, these are all offenses related to gang activity. The suggestion that is being made that it is wide and vague and too widespread is simply not true. It is all tied back to gang-related activity. This legislation is to take the fight, to members of gangs and those associated with gangs. Recruiting gang members, threatening to publish with intent to extort, demanding money with menaces. We all know that there's criminal activity being undertaken by gangs in this country where they go and extort money from legitimate businessmen. They threaten them. We are now making those specific offenses so we don't have to go to archaic offenses. We're making it specific to deal with the situation this country is facing today. And let the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, these are the specific offenses. It's not wide-ranging. Any gang member who is engaged in these offenses, the police service will prosecute you because they have been gathering the evidence under the fullest extent of the act. Demanding money with menaces, murder, shooting or wounding with intent to do grievous bodily harm, unlawful wounding, robbery, robbery with aggravation, robbery with violence, assault occasioning actual bodily harm, possession and use of a firearm or ammunition with intent to endanger life, possession of a firearm or ammunition without a license, certificate, or permit, trafficking in a dangerous drug or being in possession of a dangerous drug for the purpose of trafficking, rape, grievous sexual assault, kidnapping, kidnapping for ransom. These are all crimes that gang members are committing, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Knowingly negotiating to obtain a ransom, offenses under the Anti-Terrorism Act, offenses under the Proceeds of Crime Act, and the one offense that they referred to, offenses under the Sedition Act. So out of 28 listed offenses, 27 have not been objected to those by on the other side, and they are all tied into gang-related activity, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, going very quickly to the bill before I deal with some of the issues raised, because I know
you're moving fast. Could you just explain number 12, I see you read it. What do you mean by threatening to publish with intent to extort? Who and where and how? Yeah, what it is.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is all related to gang activity. So any gang member who threatens to publish something and then extort money, for example, there are people on television who use a program and say, look, if you don't pay me money, I will go and speak about you. I'll go and do this about you. That's extortion with a threatening to intent publication. So that type of activity related to gang activity. Going to the bill, because it's important that the citizens know what this act is about. We've defined what is the evidence required of being in a gang. We've set out what are the offenses, and I'd like to read this. Clause 6. A person who is a gang leader, is a gang member, or professes to be a gang leader or gang member in order to obtain benefit, intimidate other persons, or promote a gang commits an offense. What is offensive about that? Mr. Deputy Speaker, no citizen who is a law-abiding citizen in Trinidad and Tobago and who wants what is best for Trinidad and Tobago in the time that we are now fighting this would say that they don't want an offense of a person who is a gang leader, a gang member, who professes to be a gang leader or gang member in order to gain benefit, intimidate other persons, or promote a gang commits an offense. That is now a specified offense. You're giving the police service the ability to charge a person for that, as opposed to trying to find some archaic law, tie it in, etc. What is offensive about that? That is what you need to fight the gang and criminal activity we're hearing about today. It makes it easier for the TTPS. This one, and this, let those on the other side, or anyone who objects, Clause 6, subsection 5, we are looking to protect the same prison officers Separia talked about. I don't know if she missed this clause. The same prison officers and police officers and defense force officers and other law enforcement officers. Subclause 6, subclause 5, a gang leader or gang member who unlawfully and maliciously wounds or causes grievous bodily harm or shoots at with intent to do some grievous bodily harm to a police officer, a prison officer, a member of the defense force, constable appointed under the Supplemental Police Act or Special Reserve Police Act, a member of the Protective Service Agency, or a person involved in law enforcement or intelligence commits an offense. This is a specific clause to protect those who are charged with the responsibility of protecting us when gang members attack them. Why would we object to that? We're now providing them an added level of protection by making it a specific offense. My friends.
Time has expired. You care to avail yourself of the additional 15? Yes, please. Proceed.
Thank you. My friends referred already to Clause 8 and retaliatory action. That is real. It is live. I have young students in my constituency who have told me that they have to take off their school uniforms before they go home. Law-abiding citizens who have to change the type of clothes they wear before they go home, so you can't see where they work, because gang members are prosecuting them, persecuting them, attacking them, depending on how they look. We are making that a specific criminal offense. What is objectionable to that? Mr. Deputy Speaker, Clause 10, preventing a gang member from leaving the gang. We're making it a criminal offense to stop a person. At Clause 11, possession of bulletproof vest, firearm, ammunition, or prohibited weapon for the benefit of the gang. We're giving the police service the specific express offense that when a gang member or a person related in gang activities commits those offenses, they can charge them, as opposed to just the offense we know now, possession of a firearm. They're convicted. Some of them are pleading guilty and just getting a fine of $3,000 and being let off. We're making it specific offenses. Let anybody who objects to this bill explain to the citizenry and to those officers who we thank for fighting crime and fighting gangs why it is they wouldn't support this. Harboring a gang member. Why wouldn't you want a specific offense of harboring a gang member? Clause 14, recruiting gang members. We're making it a specific offense if you are known to be recruiting gang members. Give the police service that opportunity. Give them that ability. Give them that power. If gang members are recruiting innocent people and people who don't want to be recruited, or even those who want to be recruited, let the police service charge them for it, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We're giving the police specific powers under Part 3. We're saying that you may arrest a person without a warrant whom you have reasonable cause to believe is a gang leader or gang member, or who has reasonable cause to believe or has committed an offense under this act. This is not the politicians on this side anyway doing it. This is for the police service to do it. Why would they want to prevent that? We're giving them a dynamic power. A police officer may enter without warrant, search a place or premises not used as a dwelling house. You're using a factory to store your guns, to store your drugs, etc. As gangs, let the police enter without a search warrant, because we have had instances. The police service and intelligence services have had instances, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They're staking out a warehouse. They go to the court to get a warrant. By the time they get out, it's been cleared. This is to give them the power to fight that. Detention of persons. This is a very important power to give law enforcement. We're allowing them to detain persons specifically for 72 hours. If you want to go beyond 72 hours, this is only related to gang activity. like what we saw in the beat-up the other day. You go, you can detain these leaders, these people who we all know are gang leaders. You could detain them for 72 hours. If you want to go beyond that, go to court and get a detention order. That's it. We then deal with forfeiture of property. This is allowing persons, after they fulfill a threshold and a burden of proof, to seize the proceeds of crime related to gangs, to take money away from the gangs. We have all seen the videos of persons associated in gang and criminal activity, the amount of gold hanging around their neck, the BMWs they're posing next to, etc. This is now allowing us to take the money out of crime and to take the fight to them and allowing forfeiture. And then the last provision is to allow the Minister of National Security to change the schedule that I read. Because as you go along, there may be other crimes that no longer associated with gang activity. There may be new ones that come in. That Trinidad and Tobago, through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is the extent of the power that those on this side want to give to the police service to fight the criminal gang activity taking place in Trinidad and Tobago today. Very briefly, to just respond, we were told about social media and fake news. There are certain sites associated with those on the other side that are proffering, promulgating, and promoting that fake news. Protection of citizens. Protection of citizens. They say we're rushing legislation.
Standing order.
48. 4 and 6.
Member, could you put another way, please? Retract, and could you put it another way, please?
Now you can expose TT and whistleblower TT and these sites that are linked to them. Serious crime went down. Well, we've shown, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is against false and misleading information being given by those on the other side. They always like to repeat.
You asked for withdrawal, he has not withdrawn.
Member, I asked the member to put it in another fashion. Proceed.
They know what they do. Mr. Deputy Speaker, those...
Mr. Speaker, he again 48, 4 and 6. He says we know what we do.
Member, I have ruled based on the member for Siparia request, and the member has made a statement, and we are moving on. Member, retract and say again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Retract what exactly?
Fake news.
The statement with regards to the fake news and how you put it over.
I'll bring the evidence outside of the parliamentary chamber.
Member,
retracted.
Proceed. Members. Siparia. Proceed.
I retract it, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, very quickly, falling from the lips of the former chairman of the National Security Council, not only is it completely untrue, it is false and it is misleading. It is something they like to repeat. I can assure the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, the National Operations Center is still in existence, is functional, it is being used better than them. And I think what it is the helicopter that was associated, that we're changing from being a VIP helicopter to be back law enforcement is what's bothering her. So it is not true to say the NOC has been dismantled. The SSA is in fact gathering intelligence and is assisting with a lot of the success that is taking place. We heard about LRC. We heard about the use of the LRC, how it was working, and how the member for St. Augustine chaired the LRC. The question we have on this side is, did the LRC approve Section 34? And is it not true that the member for St. Augustine said that Section 34 didn't pass through the LRC?
48-1.
Proceed.
We also heard some very strange words fall from the member of Siparia, and we'd like to know more about it. The member for Siparia said under her tenure, the LRC was meeting with the judiciary. What is the LRC, which is made up of cabinet members and a whole set of them meeting with the judiciary to do? What is going on there? This administration does things properly, and there's a judicial committee meeting that takes place along with the DPP, along with the Criminal Bar Association, along with the Law Association, and selected members, that is the Minister of National Security, the Attorney General, and myself. It is not the LRC, but maybe that is what they did. They talk about the Soldier Bill. They like to throw, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this Soldier Bill. Completely irrelevant for the purposes of today, which is the anti-gang legislation. Then they also talk, about who is going to give the evidence. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish that for the giving of the evidence and the fighting of the state of emergency cases, we had the former Prime Minister, the former Attorney General giving evidence. The police service is ready and has, in fact, been giving evidence in these cases and in the fight against the criminal and the anti-gangs. What we've heard is a specialized unit now that has been tasked with dismantling these gangs, and what they're asking for is this legislation to assist them in the fight, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, although there was a lot of interruption by those on the other side, and as I've told the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago before, and I'll repeat it, make note of those who protest the loudest on the other side and what it is they're protesting to. Because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, at the end of the day, would be the ones who would weigh in their minds why it is those on the other side are objecting to this type of legislation. Mr. Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the constituents of Port of Spain, North St. Anne's West, in conclusion, I can give the assurance that as a member for Port of Spain, North St. Anne's West, I will support fully this legislation that has been brought to you. Thank you very much.
Yes, members. Naparima, Siparia. I'm on my legs, members. Members, I would just like to draw to your attention Standing Order 53, rules for members not speaking, and I refer to E and F, shall maintain silence while another member is speaking and shall not interrupt except in accordance with these standing orders, and F, shall not engage excessively in crosstalk or converse noisily with another member or otherwise disturb the proceedings. And again, members, as the Deputy Speaker, I will enforce the necessary standing orders. I recognize now the member for Caroni Central.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I take the opportunity to make a contribution on this act to make provision, this bill, sorry. To make provision for the maintenance of public safety and order through discouraging membership of criminal gangs and the suppression of criminal gang activity and for other related matters. The first thing I would like to say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I don't mean it in any objectionable way, but you know, if the Attorney General comes into the Parliament very, very angry at something he thinks we might do, and he is very quarrelsome and forceful and takes the position that the opposition is being obstructionist and unpatriotic. And then the member for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West gets up, and when the leader of the opposition speaks, he describes her as arrogant for making suggestions and giving information as to what transpired during her administration and raising specific objections in the bill and articulating the history in which she was involved in the correspondence between the Prime Minister and herself. If you proceed like that with two major people on the other side getting so angry and upset with the opposition and chastising us this way, and treating the leader of the opposition that way, how do you think we are going to respond? So I want to make it clear that the leader of the opposition said very clearly, she said that she had correspondence on this matter with the Prime Minister. And she shared with me the correspondence that the Prime Minister sent to her, in which the Honorable Prime Minister also attached a document which outlined the initiatives that the government was taking related to crime. And she shared with me, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, her response. And I think it's worthwhile to put it in the record, some of what she said in her response. She said, first of all, this is in her letter to the Honorable Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's letter was on August the 17th, and the response from the Leader of the Opposition was on September the 28th, 2017. And this is from the Leader of the Opposition's letter. The draft Anti-Gang Bill 2017 mirrors in many important respects the provisions of the Anti-Gang Act 2011. When the original act was passed, there was inserted a sunset clause which provided that the act would remain in force for a period of 5 years. The reason that the sunset clause was inserted was to allow the government of the day to assess the successfulness of the legislation and to make the appropriate changes where necessary. Despite the steady increase in the number of gangs and their membership, the number of prosecutions under this piece of legislation has been abysmal. While I acknowledge the insertion of new provisions with respect to forfeiture of property and freezing of assets, these provisions will be of little or no use.
Speaker,
if there are
53, E and F, please.
Overruled. Proceed.
And freezing of assets, these provisions will be of little or no use if there are no prosecutions. And the Honorable Leader of the Opposition said here that, look, the big issue here is whether, in fact, the last bill worked, and secondly, whether this bill is going to work, and whether, in fact, it is going to change the paradigm in terms of crime, whether it is going to improve the control, the management, the reduction of crime and murders, and whether it is in fact going to work. I continue to read from a letter. I am respectfully of the view that the low detection rate and the resultant few, if any, prosecutions have been as a result of the lack of intelligence gathering in relation to the activities of gangs, gang members, and gang activities. Experiences in other jurisdictions will show that the prosecutions for gang and gang-related activity could only be successfully pursued if persons came forward to provide the necessary evidence. These persons are usually, if not always, members of the gang who will only agree to provide intelligence in exchange for protection by the state. This can only be achieved if there is in operation a proper witness protection program. And again, in her presentation, she dealt with that particular issue. She goes on to indicate, the Leader of the Opposition, the second reason why the original legislation did not yield the success that was envisioned at that time, at the time that it was passed, was because of the difficulty in satisfying elements of the offenses created under the Act because of the legislative definition of gang gang member and gang activity. I have observed that these matters were not addressed in the new proposed draft, and without these matters being rectified, there will be no improvement in the detection and prosecution rates under the Act. These are matters that require the careful input and collaboration of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel Department, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Law Associations and the Association of the Criminal Bar. Their input in improving this piece of legislation would be invaluable. The views of these stakeholders, when received, should be shared with the opposition. And she goes on, and again, she makes it very clear, the leader of the opposition, that, look, we need to make sure that if we do this bill this time, having had the bill for 5 years, sunset clause causes the bill to elapse. The bill come in its original form of 2011 before the Parliament. We say no, that is not adequate. We don't have any statistics. The bill has not changed anything. There is only one person who has been prosecuted under the bill. Therefore, we need to look at this bill seriously. We are not supporting it. When it comes here this time, it is reasonable that the leader of the opposition and the members on this side would ask questions about the bill, seek to point out flaws in the bill, and before they can stand up to support this bill, they must be satisfied that certain basic things that they required are met. So that the leader of the opposition also shared with me the bill of 2011, which was modified and sent, I think, around August. The track changes, and then the bill now in 2017, which we have before us, which was sent to us, as she indicated, around Friday. So that although the bill has been in motion for...
Member, at this time, as agreed by both sides of the House, it's now 5 o'clock, and we will break for tea. Resume at 5:30.